All right, and you're taking a live look at our radar here where you can see the path of Hurricane Adalia as she makes her way through coastal Georgia. Right now, Valdosta community is under a flash flood warning, and we've seen some of the devastation just coming out of Florida as those winds and flooding and heavy downpours just rocked these northern Florida and coastal Florida communities. I want to take you out to our reporter Josh Skinner, who's been in Florida really since yesterday, bringing us up close with Hurricane Idalia. Josh, I hope you're trying to stay dry out there at least. How are you doing?
You know what? In terms of staying dry, this is about as dry as we've been since, 6 or 7 this morning. I was out walking around on Highway 90, which is the main road that runs right through Lake City, at about 7, 8 a.m., and I was just drenched, absolutely drenched. Now, the rain is almost stopped. If I step to the side here a little bit, the rain almost stopped, a little light sprinkling, some gusty winds every now and again, but this is nothing that the people of Florida can't handle right now, and it's about as good as this weather has been all day long.
And Josh, I know a lot of these Floridians are no strangers to hurricanes. They know how to prepare for one. You've been there for a little less than 24 hours. I just want to ask what the preparations looked like. I'm sure you've talked to some of these community members.
You lost me there, Maria. Can you state that question again?
No problem. How was the preparation? I mean, from yesterday into today, have you spoken to any community members?
I'm afraid I lost you.
All right, give me one moment here, Josh. We're going to try to get Josh back here. In the meantime, let's take you back out to our radar. I'm going to try to dial up our reporter, Josh Skinner, as we try to get back to him, get you back out to Florida. But that is a live look of where Hurricane Adalia is. I'm going to step away for a moment and see if I can touch base with Josh. And we have managed to get our reporter Josh Skinner back on the line with us. I'm going to take you back out to him. We had to do it the old school way with a phone call. So Josh, I wanted to ask, you got to that Florida area yesterday. I know you guys have been moving around a little bit. How has the preparation from what you've seen? Have you spoken to some of these community members?
Yeah, Maria, we actually have. It's been a bit surprising. That was probably the biggest surprise that we found when we got out here, is how few people seemed like they were preparing. Home Depot yesterday, right up the road, had about 100 generators brought in for people to come up and kind of panic buy, or to get in case they wanted some last minute supplies. But most of those were unsold by the time we got here at about 5 or 6 p.m. yesterday. And we spoke to a couple of people outside the Home Depot who were surprised at how little water, about how few generators are being sold, as we're about to have our lights blown over here, as you see this wild gust of wind. Every now and then we get one of these, but for the most part, it's been a little bit calmer. But the preparations, some people suggested that maybe the preparations were done beforehand, or that these people are just kind of always prepared for this kind of deal. But regardless, it seems like everything's holding together pretty well. It's been quite impressive thus far.
And Josh, we know that the storm has since passed that area, now in coastal Georgia, barreling through Savannah, Tybee Island, that Valdosta area. Talk about the aftermath a little, the quiet after the storm, and just what it feels like standing outside now that you're kind of out of it, essentially.
Right, yeah, the aftermath here, it actually seems, we were just talking with some emergency crews. There were multiple emergency crews that were staying at the same place we're staying, and we were just speaking with them 15 minutes ago. They were telling us that this looks like it's the best case scenario. We haven't noticed any, pieces of roofs flying off. We haven't seen anything getting blown down. There's been no flooding whatsoever. Everything has held together that we have seen thus far. Now, we haven't been able to get back yet into some of the more residential areas to see what kind of damage there might be there. But again, there's a hope that we have the best case scenario thus far. And now that the rain, for the most part, has passed us, the wind had stopped for a while. It looks like it's actually been picking back up a little bit here as my jacket's getting blown up against me. But for the most part, it seems like this community has weathered this storm quite well.
All right, Josh Skinner reporting to us from northern Florida. I want to thank you so much for hopping on with us. I know we had some technical difficulties, but I appreciate your time.
Oh yeah, technical difficulties. I can't even say technical difficulties. It's just part of life. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, taking you back out to a live look right here of Hurricane Idalia as she moves through the Valdosta area. Along coastal Georgia, Savannah, that is where we are going to continue to see those impacts. Again, I want to mention some of what Governor Kemp has said, if you were with us earlier on our stream, about the response efforts that are in place. The governor essentially saying a lot of what they're doing right now is waiting to respond. Obviously, we brought news to you yesterday that a state of emergency was issued by the governor in preparation for the storm to come through coastal Georgia, South Georgia. And now it's a matter of making sure that the first responders can safely respond. The governor did say that they are waiting for indications of 35 mile per hour winds. We learned when Adalia was entering Georgia that those winds were at 90 miles per hour. Upon landfall, I believe it was 110 miles per hour. So we're starting to see some of that wind die down. But in order to safely respond to some of the property damage, down power lines, down trees, things like that you expect with a hurricane and a severe weather event, no less, that has to happen after it is safe to do so, after that hurricane has passed through. And the governor did indicate that they're upon that 35 mile per hour wind, when they determine it is safe to do so, they do have 3 sources of emergency response stationed in that area just outside of the path of Adalia, ready to move in and respond. And that is going to involve addressing those down trees, those down power lines, and those community members that are going to need the most help in their recovery. Now, I want to take you to GEMA's website here, if you'll bear with me while I pull that up. This is something that was mentioned by Georgia emergency officials as a resource that coastal residents can use, and even those that are seeing effects from Hurricane Idalia. This is where you can reach out to report a threat, to report damage, either to your home, or if you do not have a safe shelter, this is where you can go as a resource to report that. Again, this is the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency, but they do respond to severe weather events, as we heard from during that press conference we took you to at the top of the noon hour. But this is where you can request assistance. You can also contact 1-800-GEMA, and they will give you resources and connect you with a person that can navigate you through if you are dealing with some of this damage. Again, the Valdosta community under a flash flood warning right now in the eye wall of this storm. Here's more from our meteorologist Cutter Martin, who has been in coastal Georgia for the past day, on how the community prepared for this event.
One of Georgia's most vulnerable barrier islands getting ready for the impact from Hurricane Idalia, but it is a story of calm preparation, not evacuation on Tybee Island. There is no mandatory nor voluntary evacuation for Chatham County Island. Though the elevation just a handful of feet above sea level, folks are certainly preparing for the risk of coastal flooding, especially with Wednesday evening's high tide. It is a scene of neighbor helping neighbor here on Tybee Island.
We were out here just bagging for people who can't bag, so getting a little exercise and getting some bags out here for people. Come pick them up. Preparation in the cities, they've dumped sand where it could possibly come in through the back, and And on the open areas, there's 3 areas where it can come in. So they've dumped big piles of sand to help as well. And Department of Public Works, I believe they have to stay on the island tonight.
And as the local said, it is a story of leave a couple, take a couple, make a couple. Neighbor helping neighbor here to make sure waters are not inundated with salt water as we approach that time of highest tide. Again, Wednesday evening, tide levels could get high enough to cut access to the mainland off Wednesday evening. Highway 80 very vulnerable to flooding. Right now forecasting a high tide north of 10 feet. Not record territory. That was set by Hurricane Matthew back in 2016, greater than 12 feet. Nonetheless, high enough to potentially close Highway 80 access to and from the mainland as the worst of the weather rolls through this portion of the coastline Wednesday evening and Wednesday night. We'll keep you covered through the event. Right now, reporting on Tybee Island. Cutter Martin, Atlanta News First.
And I do want to take you out to Florida, where you can see Governor Ron DeSantis, other Florida emergency officials, just talking about the impacts of Hurricane Idalia and some of what they're seeing, as well as ongoing response.
Initial damage assessments, where those are done at the local county level in a little more detail to get numbers that will then roll up with us. We already have FEMA that is standing by ready to do what we call joint damage assessments. So they have teams here already ready to go for that. So you're going to see a very, very quick response on the recovery side of the house to do individual damage assessments and what's also referred to as public assistance damage assessments. That's where we check public infrastructure, city, county buildings, things of that nature. So again, all of that stuff will be unfolding most likely as soon as tomorrow so that we could get the recovery process jump started here in the state of Florida. As always, we could not do that without the leadership of the governor and the objectives that he sets for us. So again, Governor, thank you so much.
Okay, General.
Good morning, and thank you, Governor, for your leadership and support of your Florida National Guard. Director Guthrie, thank you again for the great work your team is doing to protect Florida citizens. As we continue to assess the damage landfall caused across the state of Florida, our thoughts and prayers remain with the impacts of the storm on the folks. Florida National Guard is fully mobilized with approximately 5,500 soldiers and airmen supporting hurricane response efforts. Post-landfall, Guard elements have been providing support to our state and local partners with mission sets including reconnaissance, search and rescue, damage assessment, and route reconnaissance operations. Our 53rd Infantry Brigade Combat Team is heavily engaged in Florida's western coastal counties, primarily conducting ground search and rescue and route clearance operations. In fact, Florida Guardsmen are conducting high water vehicle rescues in Hernando and Taylor counties. Likewise, our 164th ADA Brigade is conducting similar missions throughout our central and northeast counties. We maintain additional immediate response forces available to rapidly reinforce our presence and capabilities in areas with greatest need, like Taylor County. We are embedded with each of our impacted county emergency operations centers and remain ready to provide support as requested. As briefed earlier, the Florida National Guard currently has 2,400 vehicles, including high water and high mobility vehicles, 14 rotary wing aircraft conducting planned urban search and rescue operations this afternoon, and 23 small watercraft on hand to support riverine operations as needed. Additionally, Florida is receiving assistance from other state National Guards. We are expecting 2 truck companies, one from South Carolina and the other from Tennessee. And we're also preparing to receive 3 UH-60 helicopters from Kentucky. At the same time, Maryland, Tennessee, and Colorado are standing by in case we need additional air assets. We remain grateful to our fellow Guard states for their assistance and support. Your Florida National Guard is prepared to accomplish any mission required by the Florida Department of Emergency Management, and we stand ready to support our state, fellow citizens, and our neighbors in need. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Governor DeSantis, for your continued leadership. Thank you, Director Guthrie, for your continued partnership as we respond to this event. Several days ago, we began preparing. We've had our crews and equipment staged for the last 36 hours. Immediately after landfall and the storm passed through, we began pushing those crews into the impacted area. Over 700 crew members, which includes 100 bridge inspectors, 1,100 generators, and 250 pieces of heavy equipment We've been moving these resources into the impacted areas so that we can quickly address any needs, get the cut and toss operations taken care of, and support the life safety mission. In the main area of impact, we have nearly 1,000 bridges that have to be inspected, really focusing our efforts close to the coastline initially. We have several major roadways that go over the Steenhatchee River, the Swanee River, and others. Right now, State Road 24 going into Cedar Key is impassable because of high water. State Road 51 going into Steenhatchee is also impassable because of high water, but our bridge crews are inspecting most of the bridges as we speak, and we'll be finishing those operations within the next hour. We've made a lot of progress. We're going to continue to do so. We've moved the generators that are needed into the area. Most of the traffic signal assessments have been completed. We have about 50 locations left to complete, and we will be deploying generators for those traffic signals that need power. As we continue to respond to this storm, all 13 of our traffic management centers across the state will continue their 24/7 operations, inputting real-time traffic data into Florida 511. Again, that is the most accurate and timely information you can get for traffic at florida511.com. We have 185 road rangers that are continuing to patrol our interstate system and responding to motorists as needed. One thing to remember, there is still high water in a lot of areas of the state. If you see water overtopping a road, please do not drive through it. If you see water, please stop, turn around, go a different way. It can be really dangerous to drive through flooded roadways. Thank you again, Governor DeSantis, for your leadership and support as we respond to this event.
Okay, so we're going to have, all these assets are in motion. So you're going to see a lot of efforts at power restoration. You're going to see the roads cleared in the really significantly affected areas. That's going to just increasingly happen. And we're going to do whatever we need to do to help these local communities get back on their feet. Any questions?
What time did the I cross into Georgia?
That's a good question. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I think it was probably within the hour, within the last 30, 40 minutes.
This morning, at what time did it become too dangerous for people in that Big Bend area to evacuate?
What would you say?
Probably the last evacuations probably happened somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m.
And do you have an idea of how many people might have stayed in the house? I know with Ian there was a form families filled out.
Yeah, so on this particular one, we did door-to-door because it was just a little bit different scenario with much less people. So Florida Highway Patrol and local sheriff's office agencies, again, down in Levy County, had about 100 people that stayed in homes. And then anecdotally, but up into Taylor County, it was more in the 50-ish range that was confirmed. But I'm sure other people did stay as well, but a little bit different way to do it.
Would you say that the Florida or Tallahassee has dodged a bullet with?
Well, I think if we were sitting here last night, we had a track that was bringing the I maybe into Leon County, and then they shifted that this morning. And so I would say Leon, this was from where we were when it was going there. This is the shift Leon wanted for sure. I mean, you go out there. I mean, I've been out. There's been rain and wind. There's some debris, but nothing. I think like if that wall would have impacted Tallahassee, I think you would have seen significantly more damage. So that bend northeast really helped Tallahassee and Leon County.
Is there any kind of bridge damage like we saw during Ian Sanibel Island, like we saw there?
So I'm going to let Jared come up. I don't think we've identified that. There are. Of course, in the Tampa Bay area, some of those bridges were closed, some because of water, some because of wind. But structurally, I haven't got any reports that they're problematic. And then as you get in closer to kind of the ground zero, those bridges are not passable, but that's primarily because the water is overflowing. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, that's accurate, Governor. I'd say we're still in the process of doing damage assessments. We haven't seen anything anywhere close to what we saw Pine Island, Sanibel Island. For the locations where there's still high water, we have to wait till the water recedes to really find out what's going on there. But we have not seen any major damage yet.
Are you seeing any significant river flooding inland, whether it be the Swanee or I guess it could even go over the St. John's if there's enough rain over there?
I'm sure we are.
Yeah, so short answer is we're starting to see some reaction. All of this rain is going to have to drain into those basins. So usually what happens in these incidents is we don't see the actual river action for 24, 48, sometimes as much as 72 hours after the fact. The St. Johns River is a very, very slow responding river. If you remember back during Hurricane Ian, that almost took 45 days to correct itself on that particular body of water. So again, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to completely react and then obviously go back down.
I will say, the one thing of this, the storm moved a little bit faster than some of the other ones have moved. I mean, some of these things will just dump water and they go, so slow. This one moved a little bit faster, which is, at least when you're talking about the flooding, is a little bit better than when they're slow.
Is speed the reason that I'm sorry.
What does it look like for recovery for some of these counties that were hit, particularly hard, like Taylor and Sewanee? I know that Calhoun County was still a mess 4 months, 5 months after Michael.
Well, we're in the process of doing those, of course, stabilize, rescue, recovery, whatever needs to be done right off the bat, power, save lives, all that. That's without saying. But then there will be damage assessments to see what all we're looking at in terms of damages in each of these counties. There is going to be debris, of course. That's going to be something that's going to need to be done. These counties are not going to be able to afford that on their own, of course, even with a 75% cost share with the federal government. And so I would imagine that the state would want to help these fiscally constrained counties. The legislature has typically wanted to do that. We may be seeking better cost share as well. But yeah, there's going to be things that are going to need to be taken care of. And these are the counties along that Big Bend. They just have very small budgets. And expenses like this are not things that they could absorb the way some of our wealthier counties could.
I just saw actually that there was an oak tree that fell on the governor's mansion here in Tallahassee. And is your wife and kids okay?
We're fine. In fact, she called me probably about 45 minutes ago and told me this is a really, ancient oak tree split in half. And part of it fell. I don't know that it fell on like the residence per se. I think it was a little bit off to the side. So that's going to be cleared. I don't know if they're going to have to cut down the whole tree. If they do cut down the whole tree, that's just going to be more room for my kids to hit baseballs in. And so in some respects for us, even though the tree was nice, we'll probably make do and just be quite all right.
Can you comment on some of the healthcare facilities in these smaller counties? Did any of them have to close for?
So I'll let Kevin do. I've spoken with a number of the main chains who had closed hospitals in the Tampa Bay area. They're all doing very, very well. Most of them are, going to be reopening today if they haven't already done that. And of course, they have a footprint further up into the Nature Coast. Do you want to talk about the others?
So we did have a couple of assisted living facilities and nursing homes that did have to do some evacuations, but they did that as a part of the evacuations that we called for 2 days ago. To date, as of this minute, there have been no reports of any issues inside the health and medical industry, whether that's assisted living facilities, skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes, or hospitals. So everybody is reporting what we would call green, and they're good to go, and everything's all right.
And just as a follow-up, do you know, give or take, how many patients would have had, residents would have had to be transferred?
Yeah, I don't have those numbers right here. We could get with the Agency for Healthcare Administration, Secretary Weta, or even Secretary Latipo and figure out what those numbers actually were.
Can you kind of talk about the discrepancy between some numbers that are being reported on fatalities and citing FHP and you saying that there's nothing?
So there's a process for confirmed fatalities that just goes through law enforcement and medical examiners, and then they do that. And so that has not been done yet, where we've had a confirmation. Now, I know there's unconfirmed reports. Those may end up becoming confirmed. And then, of course, we deal with this in every storm. What is a fatality that is a direct result of the storm versus what would be something where, you have a fatality that's unfortunate, but may not necessarily have a causal factor with the storm. I mean, for example, in Fort Myers Beach, people, there were fatalities because of that storm surge, no question. Well, if you're out the day after the storm and you're picking up debris from your yard and somebody has like a fatal heart episode, does that count as a storm-related death? So they always argue these things backwards and forwards. But when there are confirmed fatalities, those fatalities will be put out by the authorities. But there's just a process that goes through with that. Now, the unconfirmed, I think there have been unconfirmed reports of traffic fatalities. And that may be storm related. It may be not. Obviously, it was happening within the time that the storm was either approaching or was on target in these various parts of the state of Florida. Okay, we'll have more updates as the day goes on. We probably will end up visiting some of these areas as soon as it's safe to do so, and we'll be assessing on the ground and mobilizing any additional resources as is necessary. Thanks.
All right, so you just heard from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, along with other emergency officials out of Florida that are now somewhat out of the path of Hurricane Idalia. You can see that eye wall in the Valdosta area making its way out of Florida. Still some remnants from the perimeter of the hurricane. Once again, this is now a Category 1 storm, mostly in the area of South Georgia, headed towards the coastal Georgia area. That is where we are continuing to monitor. We have field crews out there in coastal Georgia, along with field crews in Florida. Here in a moment, we'll be tuning in to Courtney Jacobazi, our meteorologist, who has traveled down to Florida this morning, was on with us when Adalia was a Category 3, and just showing us within the eye wall of the storm just the might of this severe weather event. And now Adalia, a Category 1, but still bringing dangerous winds, heavy downpours, and we're continuing to just see the devastation and effects. I want to summarize some of what Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said. Their focus right now is on response. Now that they are in a position to do so, they can go in, examine the down power lines, examine the property destruction, and tend to the community members that are going to need immediate assistance. There were, as the governor mentioned, out of Florida, unconfirmed reports of fatalities. He did clarify during this press conference that they have no confirmation, which means a medical examiner would have to identify and confirm the fatality, and that cause of death would have to be, per the medical examiner, decided to be due to the storm or impacted by the storm. Right now, he did clarify at this very moment there are no confirmation. There's no confirmation of fatalities from Hurricane Idalia. Those were the words from Governor Ron DeSantis. He didn't dismiss the unconfirmed talks of possible fatalities, but he did clarify that confirmation would come from the medical examiners, and that has not happened at this time. So we're continuing to take a look right now at the live radar over Georgia, the South Georgia area, Valdosta, as we're continuing to see Idalia make her way towards coastal Georgia and hopefully into the Atlantic Ocean. Again, like I mentioned, up ahead we are talking to meteorologist Courtney Jacobazi. She is out in Florida. I believe she was in Perry most recently. And then we are going to have almost a hurricane deep dive, an explainer from our chief meteorologist, Jen Valdez, just to give you a better idea of how this hurricane has developed, progressed, and where it's headed. Because I know I do see some YouTube questions, if you're on with us on our YouTube live, of people asking, where is this storm going? Is it going to circle back into possibly South Carolina? Jen Valdez, our chief meteorologist, she'll have those answers for you. And then our Cutter Martin, who is out there in coastal Georgia, we'll touch base with him at around 2 just to get a better idea of what the impacts are. I do believe that he will be able to kind of show you really the full force of Adalia as she stands right now, as he is in the area of impact as we speak. I want to take you to this FlightAware website right now just to take a look at some of what we're seeing out of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. We did say on Atlanta News First, our team of meteorologists saying the impacts here in Metro Atlanta would be minimal. However, there would be impacts nevertheless, and some of those impacts, as you can imagine, flights cancellations and delays. It is not safe to fly when you have a hurricane, a massive weather event such as a hurricane. So as you can imagine, all flights to Tampa have been canceled, and several others that are within this flight path. Our Madeline Montgomery actually went down to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport and spoke with some of the flyers that were impacted.
Adalia Womack is a woman on a mission.
I spent a lot of money trying to get to Greece, and I don't want to miss it. I couldn't let a hurricane stop me.
She'll take planes, trains, and automobiles to make her trip happen.
I live in Jacksonville, Florida. I didn't know if the airport was going to shut down. So I said, okay, what's the best way for me to do? Get on a Greyhound and come to Atlanta.
Womack is one of hundreds whose plans are impacted by Hurricane Idalia.
We're stuck in Atlanta, there's a delay, and then we're supposed to go to Fort Lauderdale, delay there, so the whole state of Florida is covered in rain.
Cindy Harris's final destination is nowhere near the storm, but she is still stuck.
We are canceling our flight, and we are going to go into a different route and do a straight shot with a different airline from Atlanta to Vegas.
And then there's Jason Bygraves. He spent a month in Nigeria, and he thought he would finally be home today.
I'm coming from Nigeria, I'm connecting from Atlanta to Miami, Miami to Kingston, Jamaica.
But Idalia had other plans, canceling his flight and sticking him on standby.
I just miss my kids, man. I have 3 wonderful children. I'm longing to see them.
And there's just some more pictures out of Florida. As you can see, just some of that devastation. I'm actually trying to get our meteorologist, Courtney Jacobazi, on the phone with us. And Courtney, we do see you. I'm going to actually pull you up right now on our screen so everybody else can see you. You have been down in Perry really since yesterday. I think you guys have moved around the northern Florida, coastal Florida area a little bit, but now you're not in the middle of an eye wall, and you look like you're in a drier weather. I'm going to pull up your sound here in a moment. And I do believe we are having trouble hearing you. Let me try to bring up your audio here.
Can you hear me now, Maria?
All right, and we do hear you, Courtney, so thank you so much for joining us here on Atlanta News First Plus, bringing us up close and personal on Atlanta News First with Hurricane Adalia. How are you out there? Courtney?
One particular road, I'm going to turn it around here to get you.
Courtney, I do apologize. You froze up there for a moment. I think we just got you back, though. So go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just let me know. The service is very bad out here. National service. Bit. This might break me up briefly, just a warning for you, but I do want to take you to this road in particular here. There's a lot of tree services, and I will tell you, I'm very impressed. The tree services, people with chainsaws, whether it's residents, neighbors, or businesses, got out here as soon as it was safe to come out. Rain, a little bit in particular where you're looking. A little further down, there's a tree blocking the road, so that's blocking in residents in this area from getting down this road here. And so they're trying to get the large trees out of the road down there so that some of the neighbors can get by if they need to go get any kind of supplies or get out of town or check on any of their family members. We have houses like this that are just kind of now covered by trees that obviously were once standing. Just from some surveying around here over the past couple of, I guess, about an hour or so, that's when conditions started to get safe. It was just about an hour ago, because our coverage this morning, we were in the outer eye wall. And just to give viewers at home a little bit of perspective on what that is, when you have a hurricane, particularly a major hurricane, which is a Category 3 or higher, the closer you get to that center, what we call the eye of the storm, that's where the wind is the greatest. So we were experiencing wind gust values over 100 miles per hour, just trying to brace for the wind as it came through. Now, the storm is, of course, well north of us, as you're going to hear from our other reporters scattered around both Florida and Georgia. So now the conditions are calming down here. But we've seen roofs off of buildings. We've seen signs that are completely torn apart, flooded out parking lots, lots of neighbors out just checking on each other. So it's really active now that people are just kind of trying to get a glimpse of what Idalia left behind here. But I can't even count on one hand how many instances we saw of just some pretty significant damage, Maria.
And Courtney, we were with you earlier this morning on Atlanta News First when you were standing in what I believe was a Cat 3. And we could see, you bracing yourself and you're just weathering that storm. But describe, standing in a hurricane like that, a Hurricane Adalia.
Yeah, so I am definitely not afraid to tell everyone that I only weigh about 120 pounds, and this storm came in with wind gusts over that. So clearly that was a little bit concerning enough. I had to kind of get a little lower in my stance in order to just try and stand a little still. But it was eerie is what it was. I have been through a lot of hurricanes. Sorry, someone just drove over the power lines behind me. I've been through a lot of hurricanes before growing up in the South Florida area, and I've always been inside. But being outside, I mean, you heard the whistling of the wind going between buildings. You heard signs ripping off of their structures. Across the street, we had a gas station that the part of the roof, the awning of the gas station, metal. So you heard just metal sheets ripping off. A giant billboard fell over. And of course, we had a lot of media where we were, and so everyone was just kind of trying to brace themselves as the wind would come through. And the people staying at the hotel who were just curious of what was going on, everyone was a little nervous. And a lot of the people who were there, once the storm passed, we had, it was just really humbling to hear that, first of all, a lot of them were okay. But a lot of the people, they were very concerned, of course, of what they were going to go home to. That was something I definitely heard a lot. Once the storm started to pass and people started to make their way out, a lot of them were like, I don't know what I'm going home to. I don't know if I have a home. Thankfully, a lot of the homes here stood up to the storm very well. Here in this state, the code for your home, in order to be simply insured, is very strict. So in order to have insurance, your home has to live up to a certain standard and be able to withstand a major Category 3 hurricane as it moved inland.
And Courtney, this is a bit of a deja vu moment for you and I. We were here last year talking about Hurricane Ian, you in Florida, me here at the First Alert Desk. Compare those, I mean, you can't compare really hurricanes and just the devastation that comes with each, but from standing in Ian to standing in Idalia, how different, how similar is it for you?
So I will say in Ian, I was in Tampa, Florida for the brunt of it, so we didn't get hit directly. Here, we were under the eye of the storm, and that is where you get the greatest wind impact. Storm surge, of course, you're going to see that closer to the coast, which was the huge thing in Hurricane Ian down in Fort Myers, Florida, down towards the Port Charlotte area. This was definitely 20 times worse for us, just simply because of our location. We had the eye of the storm go right over us, and again, that eye is where you ring in those peak wind gusts that when hurricane hunters go out into the storm, they're measuring the center of that storm, because that's where you're going to know how strong it is, whether it's how low the pressure is. Lower the pressure is, the stronger the storm. Of course, they're going to ring in the wind values. So we were measuring those winds as it moved over us, just physically standing there feeling it. So that was really rough. Even my photographer was like, I was not expecting that to be quite what it was. It battered us around a lot. And of course, we were just watching debris fly. Now, when it comes to Ian, as you mentioned, we don't really compare storms. And I will tell you that we haven't gone to the coast yet, because right now, Steinhatchee, Florida, which is where we were yesterday, which is closer to the water. The Steinhatchee River runs right to the Gulf. So we were only a few miles from the Gulf of Mexico. They're not allowing people out there right now. So we don't know what that looks like. It could very well be underwater, at least inundated upwards of 5 to 10 feet. They were expecting upwards of 9 to 10, maybe even 12-foot storm surge there. And Rodney had been talking about it throughout the morning. Storm surge is when literally the ocean moves inland, and that's a huge threat with storms, particularly in this location where we had a river that helped kind of funnel all of that water in. So we're going to try to get out there when you're allowed to be out there, but right now we don't know quite the extent of the storm surge, which was the really, really big issue, of course, with Hurricane Ian down in Fort Myers and caused mass devastation along the coastline, took out the bridge to Sanibel Island. So here is a little further inland for that threat, but the wind definitely causing a lot of issues, obviously with the power lines down, numerous trees down, snapped in half with their toothpicks. So the wind threat is what we're seeing here, but that storm surge threat, that we've yet to determine because we're just not allowed out to the coast right now, and I imagine it is because it's pretty rough down there with the water.
Courtney, I want to thank you so much for joining us here, talking with us. Hopefully you can stay safe and dry out there, and we look forward to seeing you back in the newsroom.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having us. I will check in with you guys throughout the day.
All right, taking you back out to a live look here as I lower Courtney's audio. There we go. Taking you back out to a live look. This is the path of Hurricane Idalia and live radar. This is exactly where this hurricane is. You can kind of see between the yellow and more red area where you can see more storms, more of that impact, and the green, those winds continue to be strong in this area over the Valdosta community, heading more towards coastal Georgia. As we continue to follow this storm. Again, Hurricane Adalia now a Cat 1 and continuing through Georgia. We did take you earlier today to Governor Brian Kemp and other GEMA officials who detailed, hey, they need to wait until it is safe for these first responders to address these areas of impact in South Georgia. 3 sources of response already stationed in this area just outside of Adalia's path and ready to move in. As soon as those winds can die down to 35 miles per hour, they can come in and address downed power lines, fallen trees, property damage, community members that are going to need immediate help, similar to what Florida is doing now. Florida, in its response, officials, emergency crews are on the ground trying to make sure that they are getting as much aid out as possible for these communities, especially if you take a look right here at some of this devastation. The ones that are still dealing with flooding, the ones that are have either completely lost their home or have significantly lost much of their home, they are going to need that assistance right away. These are the communities along the Florida coast, more inland northern Florida, that experienced Category 3 hurricane levels as opposed to Cat 1, which I don't want to compare. You know, obviously that hurricane has died down in strength, but it is still dangerous wind speeds, heavy downpours, and community members still impacted heavily by this. Let's talk a little bit about Georgia preparation here. As we were talking about Adalia in days past, predicting the path, predicting what is going to be needed for preparation to make sure that as many people are safe throughout this storm as possible. As our meteorologist Ella Dorsey mentioned, if you were with us during our Weather Where You Are at 11:30, this weekend we should see that sunshine return and more of a normal weather pattern. However, right now, that is a whole different picture. We are in the middle of a hurricane, and for many, that means that their Labor Day, as you can imagine, is going to be spent cleaning up their neighborhoods and addressing some of the destruction from Adalia. So taking a look a little bit closer to home, back out at that live radar here, as we talk about what all goes into preparing and tracking a hurricane, I want to toss it to our reporter Rebecca Schramm with a look inside the Home Depot Hurricane Center.
Each person here has a different role, but right now, these Home Depot employees are gathered in the same wing of the company's campus near Vinings. At all times, they've got one eye on Hurricane Idalia as she barrels toward Florida's Gulf Coast.
If you need anything, don't hesitate, let me know. I'm
Jeff Parton is the company's Director of Emergency Preparedness.
We like to think of ourselves as part of the larger national total response.
He tells me in one room they've got merchandising and inventory replenishment teams who gather information from local stores in the impacted areas as to what's in demand.
They in turn will order, purchase, and get stuff shipped to the stores appropriate to the community's need.
In this room, we've got a mixture of Home Depot employees and we've got some outside experts. Everybody's keeping a close eye on that map. Each yellow dot represents a different Home Depot facility.
We actually partner with a company called Early Alert, which hires meteorologists and emergency management officials from different capacities. They take the meteorological data from the National Weather Service and overlay it, and by extension are able to tell us what the forecast is specifically for our locations.
So they can shift resources where needed and accurately respond to their associates and team members.
Our number one priority is taking care of our associates. If we take care of our associates, they by extension can take care of their families, take care of the communities.
And then shift from the preparedness phase to the response phase. In Cobb County near Vinings, Rebecca Schramm, Atlanta News First.
And taking a look again at the live radar over South Georgia, where Hurricane Adalia is making her way toward Savannah, it appears. Right now, still in the Valdosta community. That's where the eye wall of the storm is seen, as you can see from this live radar that we're showing you here. But as Rebecca was saying, the preparation that goes into that and the community involvement and community togetherness, because this is something that affects everyone. I think hurricanes don't discriminate. And at moments like this, it's really all hands on deck and making sure to either get you informed, as we do here on Atlanta News First, sending crews to assist, and just making sure that all of us can come out of this, hopefully with the least amount of damage and devastation as possible. I do want to bring you some updates here into our Atlanta News First newsroom and the latest stats on Hurricane Adalia. I'm going to try to pull up the National Hurricane Center Twitter account right now so you can take a look. Bear with me for one moment here, but that is where we're getting a lot of our updates, as well as from our team of meteorologists who are tracking this storm. Here's the National Hurricane Center Twitter account. The latest update looks like from 15 minutes ago, Hurricane Adalia over southern Georgia with heavy rains affecting portions of Georgia and the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina. Here's a little expanded view of NOAA's radar data, which indicates the maximum sustained winds are now near 80 miles per hour. Now, I did tell you, based off what we heard from Governor Kemp, that the metric that they're following is 35 miles per hour to send in those recovery teams that are stationed just outside of the path of Adalia. Right now, that storm is still near 80 mile per hour winds with high gusts, and you can imagine the impacts from that. The estimated minimum pressure based on recent surface observation is about 978, or I apologize, I'll make this simple, 28 inches. Now, this is, again, data straight from the National Hurricane Center based out of Miami, Florida. Following that coastal Georgia area, again, Valdosta, Savannah, Tybee Island, Jekyll Island in Georgia, recently reporting out of Jekyll Island sustained winds of 43 miles per hour, and that's kind of the exterior of the storm that we're tracking. So I'm going to jump out of this a little bit, see if we can look through any other updates. And again, let's just take a look at some of the reaction coming in as people, excuse me, as you can imagine, it's hard to type and talk. There we go. Had to get the spelling down. Hurricane Adalia, which, speaking of which, a lot of you have been searching the meaning of Hurricane Adalia. A name like that you don't hear every day. I think Ian last year was a little more common, but Hurricane Adalia, interesting name. It's alphabetized hurricane, so you start with A, go all the way to Z, but Adalia actually comes from the Italian origin, Italian language, meaning behold the sun, which is pretty unusual choice for a hurricane covering up our sunshine. Wouldn't you agree? All right, so taking you through some of the reaction coming in. As you can see right here, this is out of Cedar Key, Florida. A significant amount of property damage. I mean, people just losing their homes in droves, and a little further down, Perry, Florida, getting the bulk of it as a Category 3 hurricane, and those winds, that is what 110-mile-per-hour wind looks like, just ripping through the town of Perry as it made its way, now a Category 1 in South Georgia. I'm going to continue to move down a little. I think those are flamingos. Yeah. Flamingos standing on in Southwest Florida shortly after Hurricane Idalia's departure. Nature is fascinating, and what a surprising thing to run into as you're looking through some of the damage. As you can see, Reed Timmer here taking us up close to this hurricane. Hopefully he's dry. This was posted about 5 hours ago, so in the Cedar Key, Florida area, I'm hoping he's indoors, safe and dry. All right, I'm going to continue to scroll down here. There you go, more video coming in. Just hard to watch at these towns getting completely flooded out. And as you can see here in this live camera, just from the movement of these trees, those wind gusts continue to remain high. I do believe this is along the coast as well. As you can see, winds continuing from what we've gathered from the National Hurricane Center at 80 miles per hour, near 80 mile per hour wind gusts right now. We here in a moment will hear from our meteorologist, Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Valdez, with more on Hurricane Adalia and the latest on the path as she makes her way through South Georgia, again through the coastal Georgia community areas, and then coming up at 2 o'clock, we'll actually touch base with Cutter Martin. He was on here on Atlanta News First with us earlier this morning, just talking about how coastal Georgia communities, how these individuals are hunkering down in preparation for Hurricane Adalia to make landfall in their area. However, now it's looking a little different. By the time we do touch base with Cutter, it's very likely that hurricane will be in the direct path for many of those communities, and it's going to be a matter of weathering that storm. So we'll continue to keep you updated on Atlanta News First. You know, as we are talking about Hurricane Adalia and severe weather events like a hurricane, it brings up an anecdotal phrase that a lot of people often think of. If the Waffle House closes down, then you know the weather's bad. And I think that's what a lot of you in the YouTube comments are saying. Is this about a hurricane? She seems to be moving through, as a lot of officials are saying, and the damage is not as severe as we were anticipating. And the Waffle Houses have a lot to say about that. So here, take a listen.
No matter what time of day you walk into a Waffle House,
drop one hash brown scattered.
You can always order a hot meal. One of the only things that stops this place from operating is severe weather like Hurricane Idalia.
And it'll continue on up into Georgia and over to Jessup and Hinesville.
At Waffle House headquarters in Norcross, a team of leaders is tracking the storm.
Normally this is the boardroom.
But tonight it's a war room where they're forming teams to send to Florida and coastal Georgia.
Everything we do in this crisis is about people, power, and food.
Will Mazzell, Vice President of Marketing, says safety comes first. If a store is in the direct path of a hurricane, they shut it down. Inside the war room, they have radars, maps, and live camera feeds that track which Waffle House locations have damage.
We're able to mark these on the maps for the people out in the field, anybody in the office too. We can mark them if they're closed or if they don't have power, if they don't have water.
Once the storm blows through, Mazzell says it's the company's goal to reopen as quickly as possible so employees can make money,
scattered, covered,
and help comfort a community in crisis.
And make them feel good and make them feel like home, and it just kind of gives a little more normalcy and let you feel like, okay, this was a really bad event, but at least I've got a good warm meal, and the people here are great, and I just feel better.
I agree. You know, if the Waffle House stands strong, then we're gonna be okay. Is really the phrase for me at the end of the day. So, but as you can see, a lot of preparation goes into anticipating a hurricane such as Adalia. And I want to take you back out to this live radar here. This is where Adalia currently stands as she moves more north out of Florida. Again, already in the Georgia area. Since we've started this stream, Hurricane Idalia has moved a little out of the way of Valdosta, headed towards the Douglas, St. Simons, and Savannah areas. It's more of the coastal Georgia communities. That is where we're tracking some of the impacts, where our meteorologist Cutter Martin is. We'll be talking with him here momentarily, but I want to bring you back out to this live picture here as we continue to track some of those wind gusts. Again, the most recent data point out of the National Hurricane Center, the wind gusts standing at nearly 80 miles per hour, and we're following the latest on that. I do believe this is the White House providing an update on Hurricane Idalia. Let's take a listen.
Dollars that's out on the street. That number could be higher right now from that other program.
Thank you. I know that you and the governor and local officials, state officials have all told people that they get out of the way of this storm. So my first question is, are you satisfied that people heeded those calls, both from you and local and state officials? And then secondly, you mentioned the search and recovery teams that are sort of deployed and ready to go. What's your assessment so far on what those needs look like if people are sort of stranded right now?
Yeah, so on the first question, I think many people did heed the warning, but unfortunately many did not, right? We're already getting reports of people that chose to stay, and they're getting calls into the local first responders to come in and assist them. And if anybody needs assistance, they should call 911, and those local first responders will come in and help. As far as the entire footprint of those resources that are available, it's a combined effort, recognizing the capability that the state already has with all of their resources, and we have additional resources that are integrated in with that operation. So if we need to immediately augment, we have resources that are ready to deploy as soon as requested, without hesitation and without interruption.
But is it clear yet how many people may be stranded?
Oh, I don't have a number on how many, no.
From the initial assessment, what would you say are the most damaged areas, and what was the response from the population in those areas to the government's instructions?
I would say that initial reports are in that Big Bend area that have had the greatest impact. They have experienced the greatest amount of storm surge. They experienced the greatest wind speeds. And so when we do get out to start assessments, that would be my anticipation of where we would experience the greatest amount of damage and impact across Florida.
And how did people respond in those areas?
Again, I think many people did heed the warnings, and there was a lot of public messaging that went out there to let people understand that the danger is not just the cone of the hurricane, but it's the storm surge and the water, which is creating and causing the most fatalities in these events. But again, many people did not, as we are hearing about our first responders going in to support rescuing people from their homes that are now stranded.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up way in the back and then edge it. James, on the immediate needs funding, I'm curious if you have recognized the potential long-term ongoing recovery efforts that could be at risk here.
So if I understand the long-term recovery efforts based on right now, or what it looks like going into the next fiscal year?
Going into the next fiscal year, which ones are at risk here if you do not get the funding you need?
Yeah, so what immediate needs funding does is the work does not stop, right? The projects continue to go underway, our longer term recovery projects for the variety of disasters that we've experienced over the year. The obligation or the reimbursement of the funding for those is delayed into the next fiscal year. If it gets delayed into the next fiscal year, then that just starts us out at a smaller balance of what we had anticipated our needs would be for fiscal year 24.
Are there any ongoing efforts, though, that you've identified that would be at risk if it comes to that?
Again, the funding or the work itself does not stop. It's the funding that just gets delayed into the next fiscal year.
Last question.
I want to take you back to Hawaii, Administrator, because there's still a lot of questions among officials in Maui and Lahaina and across Hawaii about who was in charge in the hours as the fires burned and then the hours after. You're a veteran local emergency management official, state emergency management official, now at the federal level. How do you assess how officials there responded? Are there lessons to be learned perhaps for other communities? And is your agency prepared to work with congressional Republicans if they launch investigations as they say they will?
Again, I was not there during the response, and so I would be out of line to assess how they responded during the time because I did not experience what they were experiencing. What the federal government does is we come in and we support their efforts, and that's exactly what we did, and we will continue to support their recovery and their rebuilding efforts as they move forward.
Were you being properly briefed by FEMA authorities in Hawaii that would have been working with those officials?
What I was briefed on throughout the time is my regional administrator, Bob Fenton, happened to be in Oahu for another meeting, and he was engaging with the team and giving us updates as to the spread of the fire and what the population was impacted and what the potential federal resources would be needed to come help support the initial response and then the ongoing recovery efforts.
And if congressional Republicans want you or other agency officials to testify about what went on in Hawaii,
I'm happy to testify on what the federal role was in this process.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank
Safe
you.
travels tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right, and you just heard from FEMA.
All right, one thing before we continue. Thank again the administrator for coming today and yesterday to provide all of you an update. So as Acting Labor Secretary Sue announced today, the Department of Labor is supporting one of the basic tenets of Bidenomics, that a hard day work.
All right, I do want to focus our coverage on Adalia here. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss any additional remarks from the White House press secretary. But as you heard from FEMA, they are also following the situation, of course, and getting ready to respond federally with whatever is going to be needed in the recovery process. As you heard from Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, a lot of devastation in those coastal Florida communities that were dealing with 110 mile per hour winds. And now we're in a category 1 with near 80 mile per hour winds. And we can expect to see some of those continued impacts in Georgia, maybe not at the severity that we saw when Idalia made landfall in Florida, but certainly dangerous levels for wind gusts, heavy downpours, and storms. And I'm going to bring you back out to this live picture here of Hurricane Adalia. Here coming up in a moment, we'll be joined by Chief Meteorologist Jen Valdez with a deep dive of really the path this hurricane is taking and the latest on what's to come. For now, I do want to take you through some of this footage that we're seeing. I know I'm replaying some of this for those of you who have stuck with us throughout this stream. I appreciate it. We are following every single development. Everything I learn, I'm relaying to you here on this stream as soon as it comes in. But replaying some of this just so you can see the devastation in some of these areas. And just some of these residents navigating through a storm like this. I mean, as you heard from meteorologist Courtney Jacobazi, who's out in Florida right now and brought us coverage from the ground when Ian touched down. You know, this storm moved through fast. It didn't linger as much. However, it still brought powerful winds and completely tore down houses, properties, communities in certain areas, particularly thinking of Perry, some other coastal Florida areas. And now as she makes her way through coastal Georgia, I mean, the folks over there are going to need to brace as well. This is not something that they regularly see. It's not certainly something that they plan for as a coastal region during hurricane season, which we are currently in. However, you really can't anticipate or properly prepare for a hurricane in a way that's going to ensure that you're not going to see some damage. What you can do is make sure that you are staying up to date with alerts like the ones we're bringing you now, following emergency officials, the advisement of emergency officials, hunkering down in a safe area and making sure that you and your closest family members, loved ones, and community members are weathering through this storm as safely as possible. So we're going to leave this up for you here momentarily, and here in about just a couple minutes, we'll bring our own chief meteorologist, Jennifer Valdez, to answer some of your questions. So I'd recommend dropping them here below and just taking you through Valdosta, St. Simon, Savannah, Douglas area where Hurricane Idalia is currently making way.
Hey everybody, hope you're having a great afternoon. I wanted to give you the very latest on Idalia. Thankfully continues to weaken as it moves through the state of Georgia. We're going to talk a little bit about what happened this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about what's happening now, and of course what we expect to happen this afternoon and evening. So stay tuned with us. We're going to dive deep into Idalia, what it's doing and what it will do, and what it means for the forecast this evening here in North Georgia, but across coastal Georgia and coastal South Carolina as well. Want to give you the very latest update on where Idalia is right now. Still a hurricane. It is a Category 1 hurricane with 80-mile-an-hour winds. Keep in mind, 74 and stronger, that is a Category 1 hurricane. Once it gets below 74, it is a tropical storm. So we're only talking about a weak hurricane, a weak Category 1, and I do expect this to be a tropical storm as it approaches the coast. We do get the brand new update from the National Hurricane Center here at 2 o'clock. So far, the cone does show it as a Category 1 hurricane as it approaches the coast of Georgia and the Carolinas, but because it's already weakened to 80 miles an hour, I would not be surprised if with this next update it will be a tropical storm as it approaches, which is good news. The other piece of good news, it is still moving rather quickly here at 20 miles an hour. It is moving to the north-northeast. You can see where the center of the storm is right now, the eye of the storm. It's about 45 miles northeast of Valdosta, Georgia, and just south of the city of Douglas in South Georgia. Also, something I want to remind you is that the hurricane force winds extend about 20 miles from the center of the storm. So the worst of it is pretty tightly packed within the center of the storm. Once you start heading a little further away, so places like Albany, Valdosta, St. Simons, things there improving, not seeing the magnitude and the worst of it, as that is going to stay confined to that center eye wall. So again, Idalia is a Category 1 hurricane. It is about 45 miles northeast of Valdosta, and it is moving quickly to the north-northeast at 20 miles an hour. The track will continue to take it to the northeast here. Again, this track from the National Hurricane Center still has it as a 1 with 75-mile-an-hour winds at 8 p.m. tonight, but I do think that that next advisory will have this as a tropical storm. Either way, we're talking about a strong tropical storm or a weak Category 1 hurricane. Either way, we are going to see trees down. Either way, we're going to see damage, some beach erosion, high surf, some problems on the beaches, power outages. So even though it may be a tropical storm, we're still going to see some damage in coastal Georgia. In fact, where you see those reds there, that is where we have a hurricane warning for possible hurricane conditions. And then we've got hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings through the rest of the coast. This will continue to weaken, eventually moving offshore as we head through this evening or tomorrow morning. By 8 a.m., it's already moving off the coast of the Carolinas. They're near Cape Hatteras, and then it will continue to move out into the Atlantic. Yesterday, if you were following us, some of the models had it doing a loop-de-loo in the Atlantic and almost coming back. Models are starting to steer away from that, so that's good news. Bermuda will be on alert, though, as we watch where this goes over the next 6 to 7 days, and certainly something we will continue to watch because we've seen it time and time again. These systems, once they move out in the Atlantic, it doesn't mean they're gone for good. They could very easily come back depending on what systems are pushing them one way or the other. So we will keep an eye on it here on the First Alert team, but just wanted to let you know as far as impacts down the line, things are improving when it comes to that. Here's a look at First Alert radar. You can see the eye of the storm very clearly defined there in South Georgia. Those green boxes you see, those are flash flood warnings. So we are seeing some flash flooding and some flooding across parts of South Georgia, and it is impacting a rather large portion of South Georgia. In fact, I want to zoom on in where the heaviest rain is right now, near Douglas and Nicholas, near Alma, Baxley. That is where we have some heavy rain, and that is where we have some flooding. And when you look at the radar on top of it, you can see that that's where the heaviest rain is still falling. So not only have they already seen very heavy rain, but they will continue to see very heavy rain. Again, this system is moving fairly fast at 20 miles an hour, so at least it's a quick mover. We do know these tropical systems produce a tremendous amount of rain, so the last thing you want is it sitting over the same area for an extended period of time. That's when you really get major problems. But thankfully, this storm system is moving, so it will continue to do so. I want to show you what's going on the coast. Although we're not seeing very much rain in Savannah, Hilton Head, towards Charleston, that red outline, that is a tornado watch. So severe weather possible, even though they're not seeing much in the way of rain right now. They're seeing some bands here and there. Some tornadoes will be possible. And we always know it's that front right side. We call it the dirty side of a hurricane. That's where you have the heaviest rain. That's where you typically have the strongest winds. That's where you typically have the highest threat of severe weather as well. So we're still watching for the tornado threat across coastal Georgia, coastal Carolina, as well as that system continues to move to the northeast. Here at home, North Georgia looking so much better. I will say that the models did a phenomenal job with forecasting this storm. We told you yesterday, the day before, that on its current path, the impacts would be minimal here in North Georgia. And as you can see, that is the case. Areas northwest of I-85 not getting anything for the most part. Even southeast of I-85, we're only seeing sprinkles through parts of Rockdale County, Clark County, Oconee, Greene, and Oglethorpe, even Jasper and Putnam starting to see some rain. But as you look east of our viewing area into middle Georgia, notice we're starting to see some yellows and reds. So the rain is starting to pick up as the system moves north, and I do expect that to continue. So although we haven't had much of an impact in North Georgia yet, I do think we're going to see some heavier rain in southeastern portions of the metro area. Southeastern portions of the viewing area will still see some periods of heavier rain, could see some wind gusts of 25 miles an hour, so it'll be breezy as that center of the storm gets closer. But again, it is going to stay far enough from us that the impacts are still expected to be minimal across North Georgia. Here in Atlanta, I want to zoom on in. We're looking good inside the perimeter. We're looking good north of the perimeter. We're seeing a little bit of rain in Rockdale County, moving through Covington, Monroe, Winder. We've got some light showers, but right now the biggest impact is over middle and south Georgia. So once you head east of Warner Robins near Statesboro, Augusta, that's where we have some heavy waves of rain. Even where we have that heavy rain, though, no lightning. In fact, right now, that view you see, even though we're seeing those reds and oranges from Augusta to Warner Robins to Statesboro, no lightning. So this is just rain, although heavy in areas, just rain, but the heavier downpours will start to shift north and closer to the metro area as we continue to head into the afternoon. Again, remember, the worst of the storm is still in South Georgia, so it still has to move through the state. Wind gusts, not impressive at all. We're checking to see if we pick up any wind gusts. So far, the highest wind gusts we've picked up in Athens and Rome is 19 miles an hour. So very anticlimactic as far as the winds are concerned. And again, that's just because we are so far from the center of circulation. I do want to take you hour by hour so you can plan for the rest of the afternoon. Again, right now, not a whole lot, mainly rain, this heaviest rain to our south and east. And that's going to be the case this afternoon. Models continue to pick up on a heavier band of rain, moving from Hall County to Forsyth County through Fulton and now down into Troup County. So I do think we could see some rain here as we head into the late afternoon. We know we got heavy rain yesterday, the day before, and the day before that. We had some flash flooding and problems on the roads. So we'll be watching for that. I don't expect it to sit over our area for an extended period of time like we saw yesterday, where those storms were pretty much nearly stationary. I'm not expecting that. But again, I do want to point out that more rain in the forecast for areas that are already soaked. The soil's already saturated. So it's not going to take much at this point to cause some issues for flash flooding. So we'll be watching for that here as we head into the afternoon. Through the early evening, here's a look at 9 o'clock, still seeing some rain across North Georgia. And then as we head into the overnight hours, relief. It moves out. We will be dry as you wake up tomorrow morning. As Idalia moves east of our area, the humidity is going to drop, and tomorrow's actually going to be an incredible day with lower humidity, beautiful weather. It's just going to be incredible. I do want to show you the rain potential as we head through today. Notice again, heaviest rain, highest totals south and east of Atlanta. So notice we have some slightly higher totals in the metro. That is for that band of rain I showed you over metro Atlanta late this afternoon, early evening. So areas that get that band of rain could see half an inch to an inch, but most of North Georgia is only picking up a trace of rain today, a trace. Then you head into East Georgia and notice those rain totals really pick up very quickly. And as you head towards Statesboro, Douglas, approaching coastal Georgia, that's where we could see 4 to 5 inches of rain. And certainly that is where the highest flood potential exists. There are a couple counties in our viewing area under a flood watch, and that is because they're closest to that band of heavier rain. This is Jasper, Putnam County, Greene County under a flood watch today. And again, that's just for the possibility of heavier rain, but I really think that heaviest rain will stay south and east of even those counties. But of course, certainly something we'll be watching. Forecast wind. So a big part of this obviously is the rain, the storm surge on the coast, but also the winds. And this is where you can expect tropical storm force winds. So we're seeing it across south and southeast Georgia. Then as this skirts along the coast, notice it moves a little closer, but still those tropical storm force winds will stay south and east of Atlanta. You see those blues, that is windy, 20, 25 mile an hour winds. That is all we are forecasting for North Georgia. So again, minimal impacts for our area. Tonight, we will see some rain early in the evening, could see some brief heavy downpours, but we will see clearing conditions overnight as those temperatures drop to the upper 60s. And then tomorrow, we do have a beautiful, beautiful forecast. So again, very latest on this storm system, and I'm going to show you where it is here so you can get the latest. Good thing is we are getting updates every hour from the National Hurricane Center. So we're getting the exact coordinates on where this storm is located. We're getting the exact speed, how strong the winds are in real time as this is moving through the area. So I want to show you, here it is, a Category 1 with 80 mile an hour winds. It is 1:44 p.m. So we are expecting that next update to come in at 2 o'clock, and we'll get a better idea of how strong it is. But again, I do expect it to continue to weaken now that it's over land. As you know, these tropical systems feed on the warm ocean water. That is why these hurricanes intensify so rapidly over the ocean, but it's also why they weaken so quickly as they move over land. Now, if you woke up very early this morning and you were watching Atlanta News First, you saw this was at one point a Category 4 hurricane. So if you're wondering why was it a Category 4, but it made landfall as a Category 3? Well, couple things. First of all, if you watch the radar loop, the satellite loop, the storm was undergoing what we call an eye wall replacement. Usually when it undergoes an eye wall replacement, it's actually getting stronger, but it was doing that right before moving inland. So as it was doing that eye wall replacement, it weakened. On top of that, we had stronger shear as it got closer to the coast. So that shear helped weaken the storm as well. So all of those things combined, it wasn't a huge change, but it did make the difference between being a Category 4 when it made landfall to a Category 3 when it made landfall. It was a Category 3 near Perry, Florida, and it did make landfall around 7:45 this morning. So it's now 1:45. It's been several hours. It has been weakening steadily. It has continued to move fairly quickly at 20 miles an hour, and we do expect that to be the case as we continue through the afternoon. We've got several meteorologists out, and we've got crews all over Florida, Georgia, keeping you safe and informed. Courtney Jacobazzi, she was there in Perry, Florida, as the storm made landfall. We've got our own meteorologist, Cutter Martin. He is in Tybee Island because the worst of it has not moved into Savannah or Tybee Island yet, but we do expect those conditions to continue to deteriorate yesterday as they approach Tybee and Savannah. So the worst has not hit coastal Georgia, but of course we are monitoring those conditions and we'll continue to keep you informed as that storm system continues to roar through South Georgia. So make sure you stay with Atlanta News First. We'll continue to keep you updated as always as Hurricane Idalia continues to move through South Georgia.
All right, folks, and this is, again, Maria Moreau joining you here as we continue our Hurricane Idalia coverage. I'm going to pop on your screens here in a moment. There we go. All right, I just want to take you again through the latest of what we know. This now a Category 1 storm as it moves toward the coastal Georgia area. As you heard from Chief Meteorologist Jen Valdez, the coastal Georgia area hasn't really seen the brunt, the eye wall of the storm, but they are certainly seeing some of the effects from as it nears this area and approaches their community. Again, right now the wall of the storm pulling this up is headed towards the Douglas area. Douglas is really in the midst of all this as it moves more inland to Georgia, and then it is expected to curve more into the Savannah area. We are going to continue to monitor this throughout its time here in Georgia as it stops by. But we did just hear that we will possibly be taking remarks from from President Joe Biden as the FEMA and federal officials continue to monitor the ongoing situation both in Florida and in Georgia stemming from Hurricane Idalia. We did hear from the Florida Patrol that there were 2 possible deaths linked to Hurricane Idalia stemming from car crashes as a result of this hurricane. Now, as we heard from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, there would not be official confirmations of those fatalities until the medical examiner would be able to examine those bodies and establish a cause of death. But we did hear from Florida Florida transportation officials that those 2 men were believed to have died from incidences involving car crashes that are linked to Hurricane Idalia. So talk about some of the devastation that's coming out of these communities, taking you back to some of this footage out of Florida that we're following, and just knowing the days and months and possibly years to come for these torn communities along the coast that are just completely flooded out. And I mean, they have a lot of work ahead of them, a busy Labor Day that is just going to be spent possibly, picking up the pieces, navigating through their flooded neighborhoods to homes that might not be standing the same way they were just yesterday. So we are going to continue to follow those recovery efforts. I'm going to take you back out to our live radar right now as we possibly anticipate remarks from President Biden on the ongoing situation both in Florida and Georgia.
Joins us now. Lindsay, how's it going out there?
You're up.
Sam, Haley, we are out here at the waterfront of the Darien River Park, and we were out here earlier around 8 o'clock, and I'll tell you what, it is a complete difference. Not so much rain, but man, there is one heck of a windstorm coming through here. And actually someone who has seen this river over the years, Mr. Blake Stevens, he's lived here for a while. He says about 5 years he's lived here, but he's been in and around this area for most of his life. So is this the worst that you have seen, this river and just the winds that are coming through here?
Yeah, this is the worst I've seen in a long time. The winds are pretty strong. Main thing right now is just concerning of how high this water is really going to get. and the trees around here with just the wind, because it's pretty strong right now.
Yeah, and but what's funny is he's not fazed by it. You're out here with your family. You guys are walking around. You guys are seeing it. So, is there any fear that you have with this wind coming in, or is it just hunker down and let's figure this out?
Yeah, I don't have any fear of it. I live more up on this bluff, so I don't really have to worry about the water going up to me. In the city of Darien, we have a lot of old oak trees. So the more water we get and the stronger winds we get, that's a fear. I have a really old tree in my yard. I got a fear of that. But other than that, no, I'm not feared. I worry about the water and to see how, what damage it can cause down here. I mean, we got a local restaurant right here. We got other restaurants along the path. And more so, that's the only thing that I worry about is just how high the water is going to get. So I do ride down here and check it periodically.
Yeah, and I know that we spoke to the emergency service manager just recently, and he was saying that you guys haven't had a hurricane in a very, very long time, almost a century. Is this shocking that, you are coming out, you are seeing all of this wind kind of ripping through the area?
Yeah, it's pretty rough right now. I think maybe Matthew, or maybe back in 2013, there might have been some, but this is pretty rough. And I'm sure it's going to get a little worse before it gets better.
Yeah. All right, well, in McIntosh County, it's Lindsay Stanger, WTOC News. I'm going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, I just wanted to dip into that coverage for a moment just to show you what it's happening with our coastal Georgia community members. We're thinking of them right now as they brace for this storm. But as you heard from our WTOC sister station, talking to some of these folks, they are not afraid. They are ready, and they have done what they can do to prepare for this, and now it's a matter of seeing how effective that was. We are at this time going to bring on our meteorologist, Cutter Martin, here to join us. And this is live, so we are going to test and try to get his audio working here together. I'm going to pull up Cutter Martin here as we try to get him on the phone. Cutter is actually out in coastal Georgia. He's really been weathering this storm along with these community members and taking us up close to it. I'm going to try to dial him up here and see if we can get a hold of him. And let's see, Cutter, can you hear us all right? All right, I do think we are having some issues, and you can't see it, but I have an audio box off to the side that I'm trying to dial up. I'm gonna bring this live radar up here for you while I try to get Cutter on the line with us here. This is really the latest picture we have of the movement of Hurricane Adalia and really the path that she's headed. So let's try to get Cutter here to join us, just talk through what he's seeing out there in coastal Georgia as I leave this radar up for you for just a brief moment. did get our meteorologist Cutter Martin here on the phone.
And do you have radar or anything sourced?
And Cutter, I am live with you now here on Atlanta News First Plus. I do have a live radar here that we can pull up as you kind of walk us through what you're seeing out there. I know you're in the coastal Georgia area, and really just the path that Adalia is taking at this point.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's not just a path story here, but a structure story. The structure of the storm kind of lopsided and atypical from what we so often talk about. You know, we say the right front quadrant oftentimes has the heaviest rain, the most persistent rain, the strongest winds, the greatest risk of tornadoes, and the greatest risk of surge. And right now, Tybee Island, where I am at, is in the right front quadrant. But as you see on radar, the majority of the rain, and we're talking flooding rain here, rainfall rates 3-4 inches an hour and persisting for a few hours, that's on the front left quadrant, so the northwest or so side of the storm. And it's just an interesting setup here. Tybee Island, the winds are howling. We heard it howling in the hotel. If you follow me on Twitter or social media, posted videos about water coming in through the doors because it's a sliding door and we're facing the beaches. So wind literally blowing right into our balconies and right against our doors. And it's just interesting because the wind is very heavy right now. We're gusting 40 to 50, but the rain has been kind of spotty, and we've even seen some peaks of sunshine. Now, I say that there is still some rain here. It's not completely dry, and the winds are blowing decently, but it's a little more infrequent than it was earlier. Earlier we had very persistent winds where it was blowing 20, 30, 40 miles an hour pretty steadily, and then you'd get the occasional gust, 50 to 60. And right now, it's more of just a breezy wind, and then you're still getting that very random and occasional gust, greater than 50 miles an hour. Palms are really blowing here, but in a more infrequent basis, so winds very tolerable. They're manageable here so far. The problem is, worst of the weather is still a few hours out. I spoke with my colleagues at WTOC in Atlanta. That is the news station that services this area, a Gray sister station with Atlanta News First as well. And the core of the storm still to the south and west of Tybee Island, and they're seeing reports of damage, even some structural damage coming in from counties southwest of Savannah. If you look at the Georgia power outage map, I was going to be tweeting that a few minutes ago before I hopped on this call, noticing more and more folks losing power closer into the city of Savannah, Chatham County, and then Tybee Island, where I am right now. So we've seen a steady decline in the weather, but I will say, when we had the rain bands earlier, Maria, the wind was a very steady, very strong wind. Now that we've lost some of the more intense rain, we're still getting those very powerful gusts. They're just a little bit more infrequent here on Tybee Island, but something that probably won't remain that way for the next few hours. I do expect conditions to go back downhill as we get deeper into the late afternoon hours and then into the evening, Maria.
And Cutter, as you're hopefully staying dry out there as best as you can, I had some YouTube comments earlier asking, it was a Cat 3 when it made landfall in Florida. Now it's a Cat 1. Really, what is the difference between that? And is this still a concerning, hurricane or more of a heavy storm that we're seeing?
Well, a category is just a number. It's the Saffir-Simpson scale, which has its own criticisms. And in fact, there has been talk within the weather community, even the National Hurricane Center, looking forward the next 5, 10, 15 years. Will they need to redo the scale to better convey the message and better relay dangers that people may face? Because it is only a wind scale. Category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, only based on wind, not by intensity of rainfall or risk of flooding or a threat for storm surge flooding that we're watching here pretty closely on Tybee Island. We knew it was going to weaken. We knew that coastal Empire and low country, it was not going to be as bad as it was on the big bend of Florida. We did know that from the get-go. However, just because it's not as bad does not mean it's not dangerous and does not mean it's not causing issues. We had some sighting come off a building adjacent to our hotel earlier, just minor stuff, but we're already starting to see some of that damage. Obviously, folks are losing power and may lose power for days, especially southwest of the city of Atlanta, and we are hearing, southwest of the city of Savannah, rather, and we are hearing reports of some structural damage possibly south and west of Savannah, down in Pierce County, if you're familiar with South Georgia, kind of in the Brantley County area, Ware County near Waycross, down towards Valdosta. That's where the core of the storm is now, and it's slowly building its way up towards the greater Savannah metro area, Tybee Island. So wind's probably going to pick back up here in a big way. Not that it's calm right now. In fact, I can flip the camera around and it's blowing. You know, the palms are getting a good workout here. In fact, you know it's windy at the beach when the palms are starting to peel away from the kind of the ball at the top of the tree, and you get that yellow rather than the green. And we've seen some palm fronds blowing around earlier, just a typical dead stuff. Mother Nature kind of doing her own housekeeping here, but you can definitely see some folks out here. Wind is really blowing down Butler Avenue at this moment, and the rain is starting to pick back up. And I do think that the wind is going to be more noticeable as we go deeper into the afternoon and evening. And we're watching still this evening's high tide risk, because it's not just wind speed, but wind direction is important. And we will have more of an onshore intense wind as we reach our peak tide forecast this evening, 10.3 feet around 9 p.m. And that would put water up to Highway 80. The only route onto and off of Tybee Island. So they have said, officials locally here have said they may close Highway 80 for a portion of the evening. Not indefinitely, not all night, not for days, but water could cover the roadway and they could close the road. And obviously that would be an issue for folks trying to get onto and off of the island. They're encouraging people to, if you want to get off, you need to get off early in the afternoon and then be in place on the mainland city of Savannah for most. Before the worst of the weather arrives, probably here locally after about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
And Cutter, I'm glad you said, you know, for many of these community members, this is still something that they're hunkering down and trying to make it through as this hurricane makes its way up towards coastal Georgia and then past. I do want to say, you know, in times like this with a hurricane, a Category 1 hurricane like Adalia, the best thing you can do is be informed and prepared. And part of what you and I do, part of what all the hardworking journalists that are covering Adalia in this moment is trying to put in your toolbox all the information that you need to properly prepare and be updated on this storm. For those coastal community members, South Georgia folks that might be, you know, listening out for that information and listening out for those updates, what would you say to them right now?
You know, I'd say keep doing what you're doing. A lot of folks that are down here are already prepared. You know, folks in Atlanta not needing to take the same precautions that people on Tybee Island and in Chatham County are taking. I think the message is clear. They've made those preparations. We had sandbag stations here yesterday. Many of the grocery stores sold out of water, or at least low on supply and water here yesterday. Tybee Island's IGA was stocked yesterday, but today it was getting busy as folks really began to make final preparation. So, you know, the necessity, the necessary action, I think it's already been taken. People are ready to potentially lose power, maybe have some minor wind damage, and they're watching tides, especially on the backside of the island. But at this point, I think that's about all you can do. This is not a Category 3, 4, 5 storm anymore for us. It was never forecast to be, but this is a storm that is still just as impactful, widespread, and potentially long-duration power outages a possibility. And we'll be watching that potential for some coastal flooding and then inland freshwater flooding as well. We've kind of moved just a bit here. We're on the far south end of Tybee Island, if you're familiar, close to Little Tybee. And the winds are picking up, blowing a little bit more onshore, perpendicular to the shoreline rather than parallel, helping to push water levels up as well. So we're going to be watching as we go into our evening high tide. And as winds pick up even more substantially than they are right now, we're going to be watching for that potential of some flooding locally overnight tonight, really the early evening hours into maybe the midnight time frame. And some folks will probably lose power. Some already have. Chatham County reporting many instances of power being knocked out by some limbs coming down, and I think we'll only see more of that as we go deeper into the evening. The good thing, though, is that people have, for the most part, just kind of surveying the land here, taking heed and taking precautions. They've gotten water, gotten batteries. The stores were a little bit packed earlier today on Tybee, but they were still reasonable. They went to the store, they got the supplies they needed, and then they went back to their island home, and they are now ready here. Not forecasting inundation or any sort of big inundation on the island. If there is any home flooding, it would have to be right along the back end of the island, areas that are very susceptible to flooding, and they're very aware of that potential. Here, it's just wind, rain, and yes, we may lose access to the mainland here for a couple of hours, but people here, it's old hat. They're aware of it. They need to be cautious of it, and I think that with this event, certainly the forecast lead up has been great. They're very aware of what's been going on here and what is to come. And as I say that, our little gas container on the top of the car getting a good rip there. Winds probably gusting 35 to 45 now, occasionally up to about 50. And the worst of the weather still yet to come. Time now 2:06. I'd say by 4:06 it's going to be getting pretty bad. And the worst probably on through that 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 o'clock in the evening time frame. And I think that is when, if we join again on one of these feeds, you'll probably see some of the palms come down and the live oaks that kind of dot the island lose some of their limbs, and the risk of power outages certainly will be increasing as we go through the afternoon and evening, even right here on Tybee Island, especially for inland communities, very forested here in south and coastal Georgia. We're going to lose some trees and we're going to lose some power as the core of the wind of what is left of what was a major hurricane moves through the Georgia coastal empire.
All right, Cutter, thank you so much for hopping on with us and bringing us up close with this. I know you'll be joining us on our afternoon and evening newscasts on Atlanta News First. We'll be sure to tune into your coverage then. All right, taking you back out to this live here of this is the path of Hurricane Idalia at this time. As you can see, moving toward the right, more into that coastal area, as Cutter was saying, towards that 4 o'clock time. That's when these communities will see the brunt of this hurricane, that eye wall with carrying that red and yellow levels that indicate the heavier impacts of this storm, this hurricane, towards the afternoon and into the evening tonight. Taking you back out to our local news live coverage of the latest tornado watches and forecasting from Hurricane Idalia.
Good afternoon. We're going to send it over to the press conference with Governor McMaster now.
And folks, I'm just trying to get our audio situation worked out, but I do believe this is, and we do have audio. Let's listen in to Governor.
Okay, everybody ready? Everybody turned on? Okay, this is Josie McDaniel. Where's Holly? Holly Mae, glad to have you with us again. Chaplain John Denny.
Thanks, sir. Good afternoon. If you're a praying person, please pray with me. Oh Lord, as the storm approaches, we ask that your hand of protection be upon South Carolina. Protect our citizens and watch over those who serve the state during and after the storm. Help people use sound and wise judgment in response to this storm. Help us to not be complacent. We praise you in this storm and ask for your mercy. May our citizens look after each other and keep one another safe. In your name I pray these things. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chaplain. Well, we have a lot of information for you, and I'll start just briefly. The storm is weakening, as we know. It came into Florida. It was about 125 miles an hour. At noon, it was down to 90. Now, right now, as 2 o'clock, it's down to about 80 miles an hour. That's still hurricane strength, but it's not here in South Carolina yet. We don't know exactly when it's going to get here, and of course the winds will get here before the center of the storm gets here, but any time from about 6 o'clock on, everybody needs to really be on their guard, and they need to go ahead and prepare right now. This is not as bad as some that we've seen. We don't think it's going to be as destructive as some, but it is going to be destructive. It's going to cause, be high winds, be a lot of water, particularly, of course, in the low country. Estimates are that up around Myrtle Beach, from say maybe above Georgetown to Myrtle Beach, it might be 1, 2, maybe a few more feet, but down in Beaufort it might be higher than that, maybe up to 3 or more feet. And John Quagliarello will give us more details on that. Of course, it's changing. It may go up to 5 feet in the Beaufort. We just don't know. But it's, we're hoping that it'll weaken as it goes across ground, which is what they usually do. There's going to be a lot of rain. There'll even be rain in the upstate. We're going to have flash flooding. And we again ask everybody to realize that these storms are dangerous. There'll be water on the roads. There'll be water that does not appear to be deep. Your car could get flooded out. There could be a hole in the road. It could be washed out. If you can't see the road, then don't ride on it. Be very careful. And stay inside. Tonight there'll be winds all over the state, particularly more in the coast up towards the Midlands. But a tree limb can come down and hit someone, and you could break bones, have concussions, even be paralyzed. There are horrible things that can happen when the wind blows the limbs down, throws trees over, and also there'll be power lines down. All the power companies are making preparations. They already have vehicles and people and equipment out already pre-staged in order to restore power as quickly as possible, but we know we're going to lose some power. So that is the overview. We had a meeting this morning. We've been in telecommunication with the counties. Everybody's ready. Everybody's prepared. And of course, we're operating under an executive order, which I issued yesterday, that allows us to move people and equipment much more quickly. We are not going to have any evacuations. We're not going to have any closing of state agencies. I repeat again, this does not appear to be one that requires any evacuation orders or closing of state agencies, but some of the schools are closed, some of them are, and we urge them to try to get back, open back up as quickly as possible. The longer the schools are closed and the children can't go to school, then we know those are consequences for that as far as learning. I'd urge everybody, once again, get your information from official sources. There's always a lot of chatter in the social media. A lot of it is right. Most of it is probably wrong. But if you get your information from official sources, you'll be much better informed. So again, this is not something we haven't seen before. There may be newcomers to the state that have never seen a hurricane, never seen a flood. But those of us who've been here for a number of years have. And again, we've seen some bad ones. One of the worst was Hurricane Hazel back in the 50s. Another was Hugo in 1980-89. And that really hit us. This does not appear to be in that category at all. But it is still dangerous. And we are prepared. We have some shelters that have already opened up. We'll explain that more. Some are open now and more available to be open. And I'd advise everybody again and we ought to do this all the time. This gives us another opportunity to do it. Get all your papers, important papers together that you have to leave the house and can't come back. Get your pills, your prescriptions, your pets. Have a plan for all of that, and understand that you may be trying to get those things together when the power's out and you need to get out of the house. But until you have to get out, stay home. Stay home tonight. Don't go sightseeing to see what's happening. Don't go driving around. There's nothing good going to come from that. So we've been through this before. We've been through a lot worse than this one appears to be. So we are ready. Your team all across the state is ready, and we want everybody to be as ready and prepared. Don't panic, but be prepared and get your information from official sources. Director Stinson, Emergency Management Division.
Thank you, sir. Team South Carolina has had a lot of experience with preparing for, responding to, and recovering from hurricanes and tropical storms over the last few years, and that's probably our greatest strength that we have as a team. As the governor mentioned, he issued a state of emergency yesterday, which included activation of the State Emergency Operations Plan. Activation of that plan allows us to coordinate state resources more efficiently and operate under the emergency management framework that has worked well during many disasters, again, in the last several years. The State Emergency Operations Center here has also been activated and will be staffed 24 hours a day for the duration of this event to coordinate state response efforts. And current priorities here at the State Emergency Operations Center include support to counties, that's our primary mission, and contingency planning for possible transportation, additional sheltering, supply, and equipment missions. We started conducting county coordination calls Monday to share information and identify any issues. And we've had a robust logistics system to assist local authorities, and that system has been validated again extensively over the last several years. We've only received a few requests so far for support, and that includes sandbags and shelter management. And those have either been filled or are being filled. As the storm moves through South Carolina, residents should keep in mind a few key points. Some of them the governor's already mentioned. Stay tuned to local television and radio stations for emergency information. Heed warnings from local officials. Stay inside well-constructed buildings away from windows and doors. And then do not walk or drive through moving water, and never drive around or move barricades blocking a street. Finally, a reminder is this is not just a coastal event, but much of South Carolina is going to be affected by the impacts of this hurricane over the next 24 to 48 hours. Thanks, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Secretary Christy Hall, Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Governor. The Department of Transportation, in cooperation with a lot of our local partners, have been conducting a lot of prep work over the last several days, cleaning of ditches, cleaning of pipes, just getting ready for the storm as it approaches the state. We've also surged additional resources into the projected areas of impact to be able to quickly respond and recover. That includes additional road crews to help clear any downed trees across the roadways, additional signal repair crews into the areas, SHIP, additional units to help motorists along our interstate routes to move through the area. We are ready to respond very quickly and produce a very effective recovery on the flip side. I would like to argue or emphasize the same points the governor mentioned as well, and that is if you don't need to be on the road, stay off of the highways. We do expect some flooding of the roads as the storm moves through the state, and then once we get into Thursday and the storm has exited the state, just be on the lookout. Be safe as you travel throughout the state, and watch out for not only the road crews that are working on the recovery, but all the other first responders. Governor, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Director Edwards.
Thank you, Governor. As has been shared by the Governor and Secretary Hall, we are expecting power outages due to the storm. Statewide, we anticipate that number could be around 200,000. Restoration efforts cannot begin until the winds have died down. So restoration efforts would begin once winds are consistently below 35 miles per hour. I would also point, just because of the timing of the storm, obviously the utility crews will be out there in daylight, but they cannot operate at night. Just a few reminders. As has been mentioned, you could encounter down power lines. If you do encounter a down power line, please report it to your utility, but stay away from any down power lines. And also, do as well, if you have an outage, don't just assume that your outage, the utility knows of it. Do report any outages. And if you have the ability to use, our utilities have apps. So if you have the ability to use an app, do report that outage. If you are a consumer that has medical needs and need consistent power, do locate to an area outside of the storm so that you can have consistent power service. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, ma'am. Director Leach.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. Our mass care team and county partners have been working closely with counties being affected. We are working to anticipate the needs for shelters for our populations displaced by this event. Currently, South Carolina has one open shelter in Charleston County, 2 in Williamsburg County, and 1 in Jasper County. Likely, there will be additional shelters opening over the next 24 hours, so please check.
I want to interrupt that press conference because we have a new tornado warning now, which is in effect here for Bullock County, and we can go ahead and put the warnings on here. As it's right over the Brooklyn area, and that's going to be this little storm over here. It's going to be a very fast-moving storm like the ones we were watching earlier this morning. There's a new tornado warning, It includes Brooklet right over, at least the north side of Statesboro, goes through 245. Time right now is 221. So let's go ahead and put the velocity on here. I want to show you inside the storm where we're looking at the winds, and we can go ahead and track out where the storm. It's moving out pretty quickly out to the northeast, and I think at least 20 miles per hour as it continues to work its way through that area. And we're putting the velocity on. So there's the couplet right there, which we continue to monitor right here. That is just north of Highway 80. So if you're watching over in the I think that's 5 Chop Road area, the Bragg-Chester Road region, this is where the circulation could potentially be producing a tornado right now. You need to be in your safe shelter, lowest level of your home, away from any windows, an interior room, an interior bathroom, or interior closet. Not a bad idea to go ahead and bring a pillow or some type of helmet to protect your head from any type of flying debris, because we are definitely seeing some rotation associated with this. This is right over into the Brooklet area. Here's Highway 80, just south of Georgia 204. There's the circulation, and these scans which we're watching are generally a minute or two behind. So with these things moving, that circulation is probably up right over the Zetwell Road region, heading up towards Franklin Road. So if you're watching over in this area, this is where the storm is going. Jamie, is it still going? I think it was 20 miles per hour as we took a quick look at that. And we'll put a tracker on there as well if we can time things out for it at 20 miles per hour. But so if you're watching anywhere here just south of Georgia 24 and in between there and into Highway 80, just to the east of the Statesboro area, just north of the Grimshaw region. This is where we're seeing the circulation, which potentially could be producing that tornado. That's where the tornado warning in effect going through 245. So that's why we need to be in that safe shelter. So we're going to put a tracker on here for you, just to show you exactly where this storm is continuing to go. And it looks like it's going to be moving, hopefully, just to the west of Georgia Southern. It looks like north and east, I should say, of Georgia Southern, heading up towards the Cleto area at 244. That's the only town that's coming into it. But it's going to be crossing over 24. So if you're watching over in the Zetwell Road area, the Marvin Reed Road, this is heading into your direction with that center of circulation. And you can see out ahead of it, Airport Boulevard, Mill Creek Road, Billy McKell Road. This is where you need to be in your safe shelter as that rotation is making its way through the Brooklet area, and then going to be moving up into that region, getting close to, it looks like, US 301 if it holds together. Normally this type of rotations are fairly quick, and any type of tornadic activity are usually on the weaker side, EF0s, EF1s. But certainly we treat this just like any tornadic threat that we have, because we're definitely seeing rotation in that right here as it's pathing now just north of the Prather Road area and north of the Stanford Drive. So it's going to continue to work quickly out to the north-northwest at about, I think it was at 20 miles per hour. Yes, and heading over towards Franklin Road along Georgia 24. So this is where you need to be in your safe shelter right now. We are tracking that tornado warning in effect for parts of Bullock County. So Jamie's zooming out right now, and it's now kind of north of the Brooklet area, it looks like. So I think Brooklet and Leafield, you are in the clear right now, but it's just north of the Grimshaw area. In between 80 and 24 is where we're seeing that circulation. So anywhere to the north and west of that, this is where we need to be concerned. It looks like it's going to pass to the north of Georgia Southern. So if you're on the campus of Georgia Southern, you're going to be okay. But if you're on the bypass on the east side of that, over here, on the east side of Statesboro, heading over towards 24 or 80, this circulation could potentially be getting close to your area. So we're looking at the velocities right now. We got the warnings on there, and we're showing you where we are following this tornado warning. And this is the circulation which has prompted the warning. And that's a pretty good circulation right there. So we are definitely seeing some winds aloft. Whether this is making its way down to the ground or not remains to be seen. But we are looking at the radar, which is definitely picking up on that circulation signature. So that potentially could be producing a tornado at any time. So we want to make sure you are prepared and aware of that, where the storm is and ahead. So if you're watching anywhere here along Georgia 24, this is where you need to be in your safe shelter here in between 80 and 24. So again, when you talked about the names of the towns and the streets here, we're looking at the 5 Chop Road area, Zitwell Road area, Bragg, Chester Road, anywhere along here. those roads, this is where you need to be in your safe shelter. If you know anybody who lives out in that area, maybe they're not paying attention to what's going on, might want to give them a quick call, give them a quick text, let them know that they're going to be under that tornado warning here going through 245, as we're definitely watching rotation trying to make its way through that region. So right now it's not quite yet up to 24. It was a little bit further down to the south. This scan here looks a little bit better. This is the correlation coefficient. So basically the correlation coefficient is what we're looking at right here. That tells us what's into the air, any type of debris signatures. When we look at the correlation, we want to see everything the same. So raindrops will have the same correlation all around them. If you have any type of debris in there, whether it's any type of metal or wood, it'll have a different correlation than the rain, and it will show up here as a debris signature. So there is the velocity again. And this is showing us where we are looking at that rotation here just north of Highway 80, north of Brooklyn, north of the Grimshaw area. This is going to continue to make its way out to the north-northwest. It's moving at about 20 miles per hour. That's moving pretty quickly. That signature still holding together. We're seeing that right now over in the Stanford Drive area, heading up towards Zetwell Road. We are seeing that in the Burke-Halter Road region here, where it looks like it runs into Zetwell Drive. So if you're over in that intersection, this circulation is probably right over your area now. Again, this scan is probably a minute or two old, with it moving about 20 miles per hour. It's continuing to work its way up right over here towards over Zetwell Road region, and then continuing to head over towards Georgia 24. So again, make sure if you're watching this, we want to make sure you are aware that that potential is going to be there for this to actually producing a tornado. We hearing anything in chat, Jamie, about this actually of any type of damage or anything over in that region?
Of Statesboro, and that was 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, so we're in the National Weather Service chat area, and they're talking about an impressive signature into that region. It's the same one that we are showing you right now. That's why we have that tornado warning, as you can see in that outlined red area, including the east side of Statesboro, especially on the bypass of 301 in the Cleto area, right over, it looks like Georgia 24. That's where we are seeing the thunderstorm, the heavier rain band, the thunderstorm capable of producing that tornado in that region. So this is a look at the reflectivity showing us where we're seeing the heavier rain. And if you look at the velocity, that tells us exactly where we are looking at the winds inside that storm, which could potentially be producing that isolated tornado. And here at 229, you can see that scan really picking up that tornado signature right there. That is the rotation signature. We got the reds here with a little bit of some green embedded in there. Those are the reds, which are the winds which are going away from the radar, and the green is the winds which are going towards the radar, which is located up in northern areas of Jasper County. So that tells us we're definitely seeing rotation in there. It doesn't tell us if it's making its way down to the ground. That's where we need reports on the ground. If we hear any reports of any damage, we do look at the correlation coefficient as well. That's another tool that we have to see if there's any type of debris lofted up into the air. But normally these types of tornado warnings are usually very quick. You get a lot of rotation in there pretty quickly, and then it usually dissipates like we saw earlier this morning. So that's the latest scan. That's looking much better than the last scan that we just saw out there. But we're still seeing some very strong winds embedded in here as it's crossing over the Jones Mill Road area, the Youngblood Road region. The tornadic signature not as impressive as it was during that last scan. So hopefully that trend of a weakening trend in that rotation will continue as the storm moves over there. So let's take a little larger view. Can you put that back into motion too? Take a little larger view. A wider view, just right there, that's good. And then just put that into motion over the last half hour, just to show you where we have that debris signature. So you can see the motion of that. There's where it kind of started. Didn't last all that long, and now it looks like it's getting not as impressive, but it's passing here a little bit more out to the northwest, getting over towards 24 and 301, the intersection there on the east side of the Statesboro over in the bypass area. Georgia Southern, again, this rotation is passing out to your north. You're going to be okay with that. We switch, kind of zoom on in a little bit if we could over in that area, seeing a lot of the heavier rain. But it's going to be right over here. Here's a 24-301 intersection. That's where the velocity signature is showing us where we're seeing that potential stronger winds, not as impressive as it was just a couple minutes ago on that last scan. But the Weather Service is going to keep that warning going just to make sure. We'll probably give it another scan or two to make sure they're not seeing any type of redevelopment with this. Sometimes these tornadic signatures can reappear pretty quickly out there. But as of right now, we put that back on. There's a tornado warning, which includes parts of Statesboro, at least on the east and north side, not including Georgia Southern. You're not under this warning as of right now. And we put the back on the velocity, which really shows us where that storm is. And that is the one which is now moving into the 301 area. And it's going to be somewhere in this general region right here. So that, again, it's not looking as impressive as it was earlier. It's probably a little bit further out over here, closer to the Brandon Road, Moss Creek Circle, the Pegwin Boulevard, Eastview Apartments Road. Here's 24, and this is the 301 intersection. That's about where that circulation was trying to move. Again, not as impressive as it was just on the last couple of scans, but we still have that tornado warning going for that area. And again, a lot of this activity can happen very quickly. You want to make sure you have those alerts turned on. If you have the WTOC First Alert weather app, and those alerts are turned on, you're probably getting an alert on your phone right now, alerting you of that tornado warning for that area. And that does continue here for about the next 12 minutes or so. But we're looking at that storm a little bit weaker, it looks like, what we are seeing right now than when it was just a couple minutes ago. That's definitely some good news. So there's a look at the reflectivity, and that was the storm. You saw a lot more of the red in the reflectivity, a much stronger rain embedded in that. But as far as the winds are concerned, the velocity shows us that we had a much better velocity signature with that as it moved through that area. But as of right now, we're still seeing some stronger winds. But you saw that brief little couplet right there, couple of scans. Now it's just approaching 24, not as oppressive, but you're still going to get some very gustier winds associated with this. These rain bands tend to get up higher into the atmosphere. We have some of the stronger winds. Heavier rain can really just tap into that moisture and bring those stronger winds down to the ground. So you're going to get some stronger winds. At times you can get a little bit of some circulation, as this is really associated with Hurricane Idalia. There's a rotation embedded in that entire system. So that's what we are seeing in here. A lot of times you can get that rotation with these heavier rain bands and thunderstorms trying to make their way through the area.
So Bullitt County, the National Weather Service says, you know, they're saying the same thing we are. The storm is definitely weakened. That could have produced that tornado. But the National Weather Service is just not ready yet to cancel it, given the fact that the storms have been cycling.
Yeah, so what the cycling means, again, so when they had that rotation in there, we saw that just about 3-4 minutes ago. Sometimes they can weaken, but then re-intensify and create another area of rotation. So they're going to keep this warning going through about 2:45. But as of right now, again, it looks much weaker, not seeing much impressive rotation embedded in here. So that's definitely some good news. But we're still going to get some of the gustier winds associated with that. And like the Weather Service was saying in their chat, which we are monitoring here, there's a potential for this to, again, strengthen or cycle back up and get a little tighter rotation in there. But as of right now, we're not seeing that, it looks like, moving through the Statesboro area. But still getting some heavier rain. You can see that right now moving through the bypass, especially where we have some of the oranges and reds just east of the Statesboro area over 301, it looks like, and continue to make its way pretty quickly out to the northwest. And that's what we continue to monitor. So if you're just joining us, we still have that tornado warning, which is in effect for parts of Bullitt County, and that does go through the 2:45 time frame. And that is for the area which started kind of just north and west of the Brooklet area, and that is going to continue to produce the potential for, again, a little bit of some cycling going on, a re-intensification of that storm. We also have some very intense rainfall you see down in the Glenville area with some lightning there, but the warning was for the one over there in Bullitt County. So we put the warnings back on just to show you a larger view. That's the only warning which we have out there as of right now, and that is that tornado warning for Bullitt County. Now, we do have other tropical storm and hurricane warnings, but as far as tornadic activity, that's the one that we've been watching here. So you can see they kind of trimmed it back a little bit. So Brooklet, you're no longer under that into the Grimshaw area. You're out of it as well. It's into the Cleto area, Aikens Mill, and Statesboro, again, out ahead of where we could potentially see this rotation cycle up again. But as of right now, we'll put the velocity back on here. That's a look at the warning, zooming on in, putting the velocity, see if we see any type of that trying to develop again. We'll move it down just a little bit because I think the center was probably somewhere, yeah, right in this general area here. And you can see that along 205, or 25, I should say, heading right through Statesboro, where it meets Highway 80 here. We're seeing some of the stronger, gustier winds where you have that darker red, but we're not seeing much in the way of any rotation the way it looks like right now. So that's definitely some good news. But this is the potential we've been talking about. When you have these tropical systems, you can easily get a very fast spin up, which can produce an isolated tornado. So we have to just be prepared for that potential. That's going to keep continuing as we go throughout the rest of the evening hours. Let's go back and take a larger view of what we have going on across the area, just to show us of what we could potentially see across the region. To put the radar back on and put that back and zoom out just a little bit. Let me put this in motion. We can see that there's a lot of rotation. Zoom out just a little bit more. I want to show a little bit more of a larger view just to show us what we have. The center of the storm, the circulation of the storm, is going to be now moving here just kind of close to the Alma area, almost getting into southern areas of Appling County. So that's that counterclockwise circulation, which is bringing in some of this moisture here from the Atlantic, kind of wrapping it around in that counterclockwise motion. And anytime you have that twisting motion, as you go in with height, you can get a little bit of rotation embedded in there. So that's why we do keep that tornado threat going. We have some very heavy winds here, along with some very heavy rainfall as well, heading right over Glenville. A little bit of lightning associated with that area, but we don't have any warnings associated with that. But that's producing some very gusty winds associated with that rainfall. The tornado warning was for the Statesboro area. We'll put a larger view just to show you that that is still in effect. The National Weather Service out of Charleston, again, they're going to hold on to that warning, it looks like, going through that 2:45 time frame. The circulation embedded in there has weakened, so right now we're not seeing any type of tornadic signature, but in the chat with the National Weather Service, they are holding on because they are thinking there's a potential for that circulation, which prompted the warning earlier, to potentially redevelop back into something. So we're putting the velocity back on in here, and we're not seeing much in the way of any type of circulation, which is good news, but we are getting some of the gustier winds moving through that area. So this is looking still a little bit better across the region. Still easily 30+ mile-per-hour winds could be associated with some of that rain making its way through Statesboro, heading up towards Hope You Like It, just south of the Cleto area. So that's looking better across the region. Just for fun, can we just go ahead and zoom this down? Keep it in the velocity mode. I want to see what the winds look like with that heavier rain band down in the Glenville area, just to see what's going on with that, because it's looking a little bit better over there in the Statesboro region. So heading down into the Glenville area, still getting a lot of the green. The green, again, is winds are going towards the radar, located up. You can see that the little scan there, the sweep. It's coming out of northern areas of Jasper County, and that's the wind going towards the radar. The red, which is going away from the radar, but we don't have any tight circulation out there, which is going to be worrisome for any type of tornadic activity. But it's certainly going to produce some very gusty winds, along with the very heavy rainfall moving through parts of Tattnall County right now. And that'll be what we continue to see as the storm continues to get closer to our area. It's just now getting into some of our southern, southwestern regions, and that's where the strongest winds are going to be, closer to that center. So a lot of our inland areas are going to see the strongest winds, and I think we're going to see more of the heaviest rainfall. If you put that back on the reflectivity, that'll show us where the heaviest rainfall has been occurring. It's basically been for a lot of the inland areas. That's the steadiest rain, where we have the yellows, oranges, and reds. It's more scattered in nature here along the coastal regions, and definitely going to see a lot more of the heavier rain making its way through a lot of the inland areas. So they got a new warning out there, Jamie? What's scrolling on there? So we got saying a tornado warning.
It's not new.
It's not new? Okay.
Expires it. It expired it.
They are expiring the tornado warning. Again, we were watching that. We had that rotation in there about 5 to 8 minutes ago. It looked much better. The National Weather Service said they were going to hold on to that just till 2:45. They've now looked at it and says, yeah, they're going to go ahead and expire it. Sometimes it takes a minute or two for it to clear our system, but we're watching the chat on there, on the National Weather Service chat, and they say they are not seeing any circulation at this time. They were going to allow that warning to expire. So that's definitely some good news, but just make sure you got those alerts turned on, because we can easily see any type of these rain bands produce another quick little spin up, and we're definitely going to be here throughout the afternoon to make sure if we do have any, we'll get that information to you as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you, Dave. I think that really shows how quickly things can change and how important it is to make sure that you're staying updated and paying attention to weather locally for your specific city, even your specific street right there.
Yeah, having those alerts turned on. We talk about the WTOC First Alert weather app and being able to put it in your specific location.
Right.
It can save a life. You know, our meteorologists are working tirelessly. They're going to get up there anytime those warning chances increase, like we just saw there. So nice to see things wind down, but a good reminder, like you said, Haley, these things, they can pop up and they may continue to pop up, so you have to be prepared.
Absolutely. Now, our First Alert weather team stays with you throughout the duration of a warning, just like you just saw, but we do want to take a live look now from our Georgia Southern Statesboro Skycam. As you can see, it's looking pretty dark out there. That's quite a change from what we've seen even just earlier, Sam, when you and I got behind the desk around noon. You could still see a little bit of sunshine peeking through there, but now that is not the case. You can see that rain starting to really litter the lens there a little bit. It's definitely some consistent rainfall happening in Statesboro right now.
Yeah, you know, and where Dave was pointing out, he said that on the campus there, looked to be fine, is where they were watching for that tornadic event, was just off of campus, kind of on the other side there of the road. And so, and that's the difference when you're talking about these pop-up tornadoes, right? As our meteorologists say, they can just pop up in a neighborhood, in a spot, and they can come up real quick and get out real quick. So that's why it's so important to stay locked in. Even when you say we started out and it was clear, didn't look too bad in Statesboro, and in just a matter of hours, and we checked in with Dal, right along 80, not too far from here, and you can see how quickly things can change and develop, and will probably continue.
Yeah, for sure. And so students are definitely, having an altered sort of schedule today, whether that's online or cancellations in total. That goes for university staff too, much like many other businesses and areas that we've seen here just across our viewing area. But earlier today, before we got into that tornado warning, you also heard from Governor Henry McMaster in South Carolina. He gave his update earlier today just about what they're expecting and what they're anticipating in South Carolina. And it's a lot of the same messaging. It's, make sure you're staying inside.
I'm Nicole Newman. We are following the latest on Adalia. President Joe Biden delivering remarks on the federal response. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Governor Cooper, about the impacts of the storm and that made landfall at 7:45 this morning as a Category 3 hurricane. And it's moved over land and is now shifted to Category 1, but it is still very dangerous with winds up to 75 miles an hour. And the impacts of this storm are being felt throughout the southeast, even as it moves up the eastern coast of the United States, affecting Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And we have to remain vigilant, and there's much more to do. I just came from the Oval Office where I met with the FEMA administrator, who's standing to my left here, and our federal response folks. And early Monday morning, long before the storm made landfall, I spoke with Governor DeSantis and approved an early request for emergency declaration to enable him to have the full support ahead of time to protect the people's lives in the state of Florida. We surged personnel to Florida to help the state move people quickly to safety and out of a danger zone, and to help the governor and his team to the greatest degree possible in advance of the hurricane's arrival. And I directed the FEMA to redeploy resources, including up to 1,500 personnel and 900 Coast Guard personnel throughout the Southeast. I directed Administrator Criswell to stay in close touch with the governor. She was with me when I was speaking to him as well. And I guess he's maybe tired of hearing of both of us, but he seemed like he welcomed it. As a matter of fact, I've asked that she get on the plane and leave for Florida this afternoon. She'll meet with Governor DeSantis tomorrow and begin helping conducting the federal assessment at my direction. Federal teams on the ground are going to continue to work with the first responders in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina to get people to safety. You've all been reporting this, you've seen it on television. There are a number of rescues already taking place as I walked out of my office a moment ago to begin to recover from the impacts of this storm. I let each governor I spoke with know if there's anything the states need right now, I'm ready to mobilize that support of what they need. I don't think anybody can deny the impact of the climate crisis anymore. Just look around. Historic floods, more intense droughts, extreme heat, significant wildfires have caused significant damage like we've never seen before, not only throughout the Hawaiian Islands in the United States, but in Canada and other parts of the world. We've never seen this much fire. And while we're dealing with this latest extreme weather event, I remain laser focused on recovering and rebuilding efforts in Maui. We were out there, and many of you were there as well. It's devastating what happened there. When I took office, I directed my team to raise our game in how we lead and coordinate our responses to natural disasters. And because I've been around a while and I've known how these function. To ensure we met people where they are, when they need our help the most. Because of the devastation of wildfires from California, New Mexico, Oregon, Washington State, Idaho, Louisiana, we've learned a heck of a lot. A lot of damage in the meantime, but we've learned a heck of a lot. And we're putting the lessons we've learned to work. In a few moments, I'm going to be with my entire cabinet in the next room over, who are leading the federal recovery and rebuilding efforts and report on their progress, providing urgently needed support to the people of Maui. If I can note for just parenthetically for just a moment, you know, when you have your home washed away, when you are a fire that's taken your home away, when your school has been destroyed and there's no way you can't send your kid to school, these are urgent needs. And no matter how bright, how informed, how wealthy, how poor they are, you just need reassurance. So how in God's name are I going to get through this? Well, Jill and I saw the devastation in Maui firsthand. And I want to thank Governor Josh Green, who's doing one hell of a job. Along with their congressional delegation, there's total unity out there. And for everything they're doing to support the recovery effort. I directed my team to do everything we can for as long as it takes to help Maui recover, rebuild in a way that respects and honors Hawaiian traditions and cultures and the needs of the local community. We're not going to turn this into a new land grab. We're not trying to see multi-million-dollar homes on the beach. We want to restore that part of the island like it was before, only better. To that end, when I was on the island last week, I appointed Bob Fenton, one of the nation's leading emergency managers, and I mean that's not hyperbole, who's been on the ground in Hawaii since before the fires erupted as our chief federal response coordinator to lead our long-term recovery on Maui. I've charged him with making sure the community has everything the federal government can offer to heal and build back better as fast as possible. You know, he'll be giving me a report virtually on Maui when I walk out of this room and go to the cabinet room where I'm meeting in just a few minutes. And as an example of our commitment, we're not only building back, but we're going to build back stronger and more resilient future, which means we need to be ready to withstand any challenge coming our way in rebuilding the way that Maui wants to rebuild, the nature of the rebuilding. Today, I'm announcing that $95 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law is on the way to Hawaii to harden the ground power, harden the grid we talk about. I know when we start talking about the grid, the average American out there thinks, what are we talking about? Well, the ability to transmit electricity. Well, let me tell you what it means. It means investments to make sure electricity can continue to reach homes, hospitals, water stations, even during intense storms and extreme weather. Funding will be used for stronger and better poles holding up the the wires that transmit the electricity. It'll mean stronger material. It'll mean burying these lines that transmit the electricity underground. It's more expensive to do that, but where possible, we should put them underground. They're safest. It means clearing trees and brush around these wires. It's like the kindling is that exists out there. That's what it ends up being when one of those wires come down. And this funding is going to pay for installing technology like smart meters that can tell you where the problem actually is when the line goes down. That's part of the problem. A lot of these in other, not Hawaii's, Maui's not that big, but in parts of California, Oregon, and all these places where these fires were, where did the wire go down? We're going to be installing meters that let the person sitting back in the headquarters know, whoa, it went down at such and such a coordinates, such and such a pole. To enable emergency responders to more quickly identify which lines are damaged or down, so repairs can happen as quickly as possible and get the power back on and prevent damage from occurring. Anything else at our disposal. The Department of Energy, and the Secretary, we're going to be talking about this in a minute, accelerated the announcement of this funding to meet the moment. All this is going to help Maui and the entire state of Hawaii better withstand future disasters, because this is not going away. It's not like, well, these are the last disasters. We know this works, and I've watched some of you folks stand in front of me on television in dangerous circumstances reporting on this stuff. You know it. It's one thing to look at it on television and hear someone else report, but you're standing there and you're wondering, whoa, what's that behind me? You know, it makes a difference, you know, because we've done it before. Look, under the Obama-Biden administration, we invested hundreds of millions of dollars in the state of Florida, replacing wooden power poles and steel poles, and we buried these electric lines. Well, I wonder what would happen now if we hadn't done that. I'm not sure what, but the point is we did it. It helped them withstand and recover from disasters more quickly than they otherwise would have. So it works. It costs a lot of money, but it works, but it saves a lot of money long term. When Jill and I visited Maui last week, we saw firsthand the magnitude of the loss. Your lives have been dramatically changed if anybody in Maui is listening. You've lost everything. I mean, they lost everything. And we're doing everything we can to move heaven and earth to help you recover, rebuild, and return to your lives. We've already have dedicated $24 million to removal of hazardous material left behind in the fire's wake. There's pollution that is in that material. A lot of that you just can't go in and take bulldozers and clear it all out. You got to take the bad stuff out. You got to take out the polluted, the dangerous stuff. And once we've done that, we'll be able to remove all the debris. But it's going to be frustrating as the devil for people. They say, why can't I go back? Storm's over. Why can't I go back and look and see if I can find that wedding ring, or why I can find that album? Can't find that thing that I've lost in the house. It's really tough. Really, really tough. I didn't do anything like that, but lightning struck my house. We had to be out of that house for about 7 months while it was repaired because so much damage was done to the house and half the house almost collapsed. You know, and you wonder what's going to happen. We've already dedicated $400 million to pay for the debris removal. Once we get the toxic stuff out, to take all the removal, and the federal government's going to pay for that. The state is not paying for that. And we're going to dedicate more if necessary. But I want to be clear with the people of Maui about what to expect. The work we're doing is going to take time, in some cases a long time. We're going to do it in a way to make sure we're respectful to the wishes and the traditions of the people of Hawaii as well. The process of removing hazardous material and cleaning the environmental damage means folks can't get back in the area right away. The start of school has been disrupted. It's painful. I get it. What can I tell you? The one thing I can tell you is that we're going to be with you every step of the way. We're not walking away. When Jill and I visited, we were struck by the absolute courage of the people there. People who lost loved ones, lost everything. People are just trying to find out whether the ones they lost. Are they gone? Are they dead? Are they missing? Or are they just not accountable? Where are they? They've lost everything. everywhere we turned, we saw and felt the aloha spirit. Neighbors helping neighbors. I mean, I know this sounds kind of corny, but it's true. It's true. Everybody's reaching out, trying to help the other guy. Turning pain into purpose and keeping the faith. I've directed my administration to continue working with urgency and focus to help the people of Maui on their journey of recovery and healing. And we're going to make sure you are healed and you're in better shape than before. I said when I was on the island last week, we're not leaving until the job's done. And we'll be there as long as it takes. I know there's a lot of questions you probably have. I'll take a few, but I have a cabinet meeting coming up right away. Yes.
Mr. President, can you assure Americans that the federal government is going to have the emergency funding that they need to get through this hurricane season?
The answer is, if I can't do that, I'm going to point out why. How can we not respond? My God, how can we not respond to these needs? And so I'm confident, even though there's a lot of talk from some of our friends up on the Hill about the cost, we got to do it. This is the United States of America. Yes.
Mr. President, Governor DeSantis is also running for president. You are running for re-election. Do you sense any politics in your conversations with him about this issue?
No, believe it or not, I know that sounds strange, especially how the nature of politics today. But you know, I was down there when the last major storm. I spent a lot of time with him, walking from village to from community to community, making sure he had what he needed to get it done. I think he trusts my judgment and my desire to help, and I trust him to be able to suggest that this is not about politics, it's about taking care of the people of the state.
Mr. President, on the hurricane, in your conversations with the governors, is there anything that you've heard from them that gives you pause? Things that you think need to be there that are not quite there yet? And secondly, are you making any contingency plans on your own schedule, either with this Labor Day, with your own personal travels, and also for your international travels that are coming up next week? That are you going to need to just reshuffle things?
Well, I may, I just don't know yet. And first of all, each of the governors seem to be focused. And I think what's changing, particularly the governors from North South Carolina as well as Georgia, is there wasn't an anticipation that it'd be moving up the coast. They were hopeful, and initially it looked like it was going to go further east and not affect them. So I think they're all in the process of rapidly focusing on what may happen, what may not happen, and what I hope the people of those states listen to is the warnings when they come from a lot of it, they may not see 130-mile-an-hour winds coming through, but guess what? You may also be on the shore and low-lying area and have a 8-foot surge of wind surge coming from off the ocean. But they've all been through it. The guy furthest north, Governor Cooper, is really focused on it. I mean, they all are. I don't mean to pick, but I mean, he is the least likely to have the most impact occurring on his shores. But it's a lot of low-lying country. I was joking with him. I mean, my state is, when you have anything like a hurricane in my state, in Delaware and suburban and the eastern shore of Maryland, we're 3 feet above sea level, man. You worry about what those surges do. And that's the same thing still happening in Florida, because you're talking about the high tide, low tide, adding 3 feet and so on. So I found them all to be laser focused on what their needs were, and I asked them, but I think they're reassured that we're going to be there for whatever they need, including search and rescue off the shore of the Coast Guard and Coast Guard helicopters and the like.
Mr. President. Mr. President, I have a question for you about, we talked a lot about power lines and having stronger poles. I was curious, some power companies have talked about potentially shutting off power when there's sort of high wind incidences for vast parts of the country. And I'm wondering if you think this is sort of an appropriate response by power companies, or if you think that they should be working to sort of harden their infrastructure more than just ending power when there's a...
I think both. Look, it's very expensive to secure these power lines, both in terms of the actual structure. You know, we look out there and you see these large towers carrying multiple wires, and the wires are like that thick, and they're carrying an awful lot of energy, and sometimes those entire towers come down. I am not expert enough to know when it's appropriate to shut down that line. And that's one of the reasons why I think having the technology to have these meters on each of these facilities tells you where the danger is. So I can picture, I'm getting beyond my expertise here, but.
You're talking about huge numbers of Americans suddenly not having power because the company makes a determination that.
Well, but by the way, we also know how many huge number of Americans have died, how many huge number of Americans have, for example, more forest has been burned to the ground since I've become, in the time I've been doing this, than the entire square miles of the state of Maryland. Imagine the entire state of Maryland burning to the ground. That's how much is already burned to the ground. So I think as we try to harden the capacity to transmit energy, it's not irrational to make a judgment that you may have to, in a certain circumstance, shut off the power. I just don't know enough to know the detail of how to do that. I mean, where that decision is made. That's why we're starting off. I was talking with Sherwood Randall, who handles this for me, about the need to put these meters along these so we know where the power is going down. You may be able to shut off parts. I just don't know enough to know that.
Mr. President, are you concerned at all that a potential government shutdown would impact the recovery efforts? And what is your reaction to House Republicans who stated they're launching an investigation into the federal response in Maui?
Well, I welcome a federal response in Maui. I think that they should go out and talk to every elected official, from the mayors to the governors to the United States senators to the congresspersons. I welcome, and once they go out and see it, then I'm sure they'll provide the money. Thank you all very much.
Any concerns about your friend Mitch McConnell's health?
By the way, I just heard literally coming out, and Mitch is a friend, as you know, not a joke. We always, people don't believe that's the case, but we have disagreements politically, but he's a good friend, and so I'm going to try to get in touch with him later this afternoon. I don't know enough to know.
Do you think he's
Thank
fit
you.
to serve and should run for re-election?
President Joe Biden given an update on the federal response to Idalia, a warning from the president. The storm is still very dangerous despite weakening. Now, Adalia is impacting Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. And you heard the president say their federal emergency declaration was declared in Florida earlier this week to prepare. FEMA already has boots on the ground in the Sunshine State to help the state's team with their response efforts. Now, that includes a federal assessment that we heard President Biden say is expected to begin tomorrow. Now, earlier today, the White House sent out a release that says the president called all the governors, and you heard the president say that. He called Governor DeSantis of Florida, Governor Kemp of Georgia, Governor McMaster of South Carolina, and Governor Cooper of North Carolina, telling them all that each of their states have the full support of his administration. Now, prior to landfall, again, the president directed the federal government to pre-position personnel and resources, to immediately support the response and recovery efforts in all of those states. The president told the governors that federal teams will work closely with their local officials and first responders as the need.
About an hour southeast of the city. So, Brittany, how are things looking out there right now?
Well, and I can tell you it's been a slow and steady start out here so far. Over the last couple of hours, we've seen some on and off rain, but nothing significant just yet. This is one of the areas that is expected to see those outer bands and winds from Hurricane Idalia. Now, we've been popping into hardware stores like the one you see right over there. Store owners telling me it's been business as usual. Now, if and when conditions do in fact ramp up, city officials say they are prepared.
We pay attention and we know what's coming, so we've taken some extra steps. Just spend a little extra time on the chainsaw this morning, making sure it's ready to go and making sure that all of our life jackets and throw ropes, if we have to do any water rescues, are ready and everyone's familiar with how to use them.
Now, those larger and stronger bands of rain and wind, we're told, are still making their way into the area. So conditions here could significantly pick up in the next couple of hours. Reporting live in Edenton, Brittany Ford, Atlanta News First.
Now, again, not expecting major impacts from the hurricane here in the metro, but that doesn't mean the local Red Cross isn't already preparing. Right now, 108 people from the American Red Cross of Georgia are assigned to storm response with more on standby. Georgia Power also has people in place ready to restore outages if there are any, and agencies and organizations across the state urging Georgia residents to take these warnings seriously. Georgia Power is also reminding people in and outside of Metro Atlanta to prepare for possible downed trees and power line outages. The Atlanta News First team is hard at work for you both on air right here and online. Download the First Alert weather app so you can receive updates about that potential severe weather and when it might be coming to your neighborhood.
Well, people right here in Metro Atlanta, they woke up to extensive damage from the storms that rolled through overnight. It was another day of cleanup after storms brought down more trees and power lines, too. Atlanta News First, Bridget Spencer on Morningside Drive, where crews are working to remove a massive tree there.
Well, we may not be bearing the brunt of Hurricane Idalia, but Metro Atlanta is getting some storm action, particularly overnight. This large tree just toppled over and blocked Morningside Drive. Now, this has been an hours-long ordeal. Crews say they've been out here overnight since about 2:30 this morning trying to get power restored to a few of the homes out here. Now, you can see that this tree did fall from this homeowner's front yard. I just spoke with him off camera. He says this really is a difficult time for his family, but he is just thankful that nobody was injured. Had this tree fallen a different direction, it would have fell on top of his house. So he certainly is grateful right now. But in the meantime, a lot of neighbors we've been talking to briefly have just been trying to figure out how to reroute. They've been trying to turn into this area onto Morningside Drive, and they're not able to get home, so they're having a detour. It's causing a lot of headaches, but thankfully a lot of them are saying they are just glad that nobody was injured. From Morningside Drive in Northeast Atlanta, Bridget Spencer, Atlanta News First.
No injury.